The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, very good morning to you. 6 o'clock is the time. Last day of October, it's Halloween. Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
And here's what's leading our programme this morning. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, saying it would amount to a surrender to Hamas, and reiterated this is a time for war. Mark White has the latest for us from Tel Aviv.
Well, in a rare piece of good news, an Israeli soldier taken hostage on the 7th of October was rescued by her colleagues yesterday, but more than 230 other hostages remain in Hamas captivity.
Meanwhile, in Britain, divisions are flaring over Israel's war. The Prime Minister has sacked MP Paul Bristow for defying the PM by calling for a ceasefire.
Battle over Dambusters HQ. Protests in a High Court case today over whether 2,000 migrants should be housed at RAF Scampton, home to the famous Dambuster pilots.
Paul Coit is going to have the latest in sport, as per usual.
All about the Ballon d'Or. The greatest footballer in the world, Lionel Messi, surprise, surprise. He wins for the 8th time. They should probably name the award after him. And Jude Bellingham wins the best player under 21.
But you're right, seriously, to get the Ballon d'Or, to be the best footballer in the world, 8 years.
He's that good, though, isn't he?
That's incredible.
It's going to be. That's the last time, though. I tell you, that's going to be the last time.
I was following Gary Lineker's Instagram yesterday, how he and all his sons. He's got a lot of sons.
He has got a lot of sons. I think every time I look, there's another one there.
There's another one there. Yeah,
17 sons he has.
Yes.
It's like the Waltons. They call him John Boy.
Good night, John Boy.
Good night.
Good morning. Alex Burkhill with the weather.
Storm Kieran's arriving later tomorrow, but before then we have some wet and windy weather around today as well. I'll have more later.
And it's a big day for His Majesty the King and Queen have begun a 4-day state visit to Kenya, a place of special significance to the royal family. It marks their first visit to a Commonwealth country since the coronation.
You can join in any of our discussions, including an observation that I've made, that the King looks very like his great uncle, was it?
His uncle.
His uncle?
Oh, no, his great uncle, you're right, yeah.
George King Edward VII.
The one who defected.
The one who ran off with Mrs. What's-her-name from America and Mrs. Simpson. And if you just see those pictures, I don't know if we can see them again, but I think he looks very like an old Windsor.
Well, that is what he is now.
That is what he is.
I dare
but
say.
I've never noticed the resemblance. Look, I think he looks really like him.
I think it's the owlish position of his glasses on the end of his nose and looking bookish there.
Yes, yeah.
But Kenya's a wonderful place and very interesting he's chosen that because of all of the sort of family connections to the country.
And did you colonise Kenya, or what, were you there?
My dad did grow up in Kenya.
Your dad,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So he was one of these colonialists. No, I'm just saying, because they're saying that Charles should apologise for all the Brits that colonised Kenya.
Well, he was a child, so...
I'm just saying.
Just saying as a child.
I'm just saying, do you think your father owes Kenya an apology?
No.
Right, there you are. Do you think it? GBViews at GBnews.com, because it is being called for. Or we never really went anywhere further than Bangor. We didn't get to...
No apologies necessary.
Bangor was like 8 miles outside
Yeah,
Belfast.
well, that was, pretty great.
It wasn't Kenya, but, it was Bangor. Anyway, keep the comments coming in this morning.
Now, top story this morning, we're asking if the UK is becoming more divided than ever over Israel's war on Hamas. The Prime Minister's message is that the country stands united with Israel.
OK, there are increasing numbers turning out for pro-Palestinian protests. They stretch police resources, while Rebel, Conservative and Labour MPs are demanding a ceasefire and paying the penalty for it. For instance, it's cost an MP his job. That man there, Paul Bristow, he demanded a full ceasefire, saying we're not consistent.
Well, Downing Street saying it was not consistent with the principles of collective responsibility. That's what he was accused of. But he was objecting to collective punishment of the Palestinian people. Well, Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has rejected calls for any ceasefire in Gaza, saying it would amount to a surrender to Hamas. And he cited the Bible, saying this is a time for war.
Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th. Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism, to surrender to barbarism. That will not happen.
The charity UNICEF says 420 children are being injured or killed in Gaza every day because of the bombing.
Well, let's go to our security editor, Mark White, who's in Tel Aviv for us this morning. Look, lots of lines coming out of sort of politics here in the UK. But in terms of where you are, the big developments have been the release of this female Israeli soldier and also the footage by Hamas of 3 further female hostages in Gaza.
Yes, indeed. The release, or rescue, I should say, of Corporal Ori Megafeet couldn't have come at a better time, I think, for the Israeli government, because just hours earlier we had the release by Hamas. It was expected, the release of hostage videos as part of Hamas's propaganda war, and sure enough, it came with the release of that hostage video showing 3 women. One of the women actually quite critical of Benjamin Netanyahu and the comments that she was saying and asking for a ceasefire. But I think there's no doubt, of course, these women are speaking under extreme duress, and you've got to take that into account with anything that they say. But that video, of course, was in terms of the Israeli public, further proof for those that believe there should be a pause in the ground war to allow the hostage negotiations to continue. So I think the news that the Israeli government could deliver that this corporal had been rescued after being abducted by Hamas terrorists on the 7th of October was enough for the Prime Minister in his news address last night to say to the people, look, you know, there are no perfect solutions here, but we have taken the determination that those hostage negotiations had stalled in terms of the negotiations that were taking place between the Qatari government and those Hamas terrorists, and that all they were doing was playing for time. And that the important thing to do is to push ahead with this ground war. And in doing that, he says they are still absolutely fixed on trying to release those hostages, and it can be done with the release or rescue of Corporal Megafeets.
OK, Mark White with that. Thanks very much indeed.
Sense now on how things are taking place domestically. The Labour MP Andy MacDonald has been suspended by Keir Starmer. His sin was saying between the river and the sea, as he made a speech urging peace between Israelis and Palestinians at a recent rally. I don't even know what that means, but anyway.
Well, it's deemed a highly
provocative
song and refers to wiping out everybody between the River Jordan and the sea. Yeah, so it's very
well,
offensive.
either we explain that or don't repeat that again. Conservative MP Paul Bristow has been sacked by the Prime Minister from his job after publicly urging Rishi Sunak to push for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Let's get the latest on this from GBNews Deputy Political Editor Tom Harwood. Paul Bristow, first of all, sacked from his job after he broke ranks. OK.
Yes, Paul Bristow, Member of Parliament for Peterborough since 2019, seen as a Boris Johnson loyalist, someone that you wouldn't expect to be on the sort of more radical side of the party on this issue, has called for a permanent ceasefire in local press. And Rishi Sunak took very quick and decisive action in terms of sacking him from his relatively junior parliamentary private secretary role, which is interesting because the Labour Party has seen a huge number of shadow ministers say much the same thing against the line. We must remember that the Conservative Party and the Labour Party leadership have the same line here, which is not calling for a permanent ceasefire. They think that that would only give Hamas time to rearm, regroup and commit another massacre of Jews, as we saw 3 weeks ago. The line from both Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak is for a humanitarian pause, to allow humanitarian aid in, to allow corridors for safe refugee removal and all the rest of it. But calling for a ceasefire seems to go beyond that line. Paul Bristow is the only shadow Conservative minister who, the only Conservative minister who has said something like that. He's had his position taken off him. Whereas in the Labour Party, 7 shadow ministers have broken ranks and called for this permanent ceasefire, and yet none of them have had have been removed from their shadow ministerial position. And so that's a bit of a dividing line that has now broken out between the iron discipline that Rishi Sunak wants to present in the Conservative Party and perhaps the more divisions that we're seeing in the Labour Party. And then on top of that, we get this second issue today, or yesterday, of Andy MacDonald, the MP for Middlesbrough, who used this phrase, river to the sea. Now, the common refrain of river to the sea is, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. And when people chant that at rallies, many Jewish people feel that means wiping out the state of Israel from the face of the earth. And so many people feel that using that phrase, river to the sea, has all of these connotations of anti-Semitism.
That wasn't the context he was using it in, to be clear.
He didn't use it specifically. He didn't use the phrase from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free, but he used the phrase from the river to the sea. And so many people took that from that, the context of the wider phrase. But of course, he denies that. He would say that he was just using it in the context of wanting there to be peace between Israelis and Palestinians. But Keir Starmer clearly has taken a line on this, perhaps because he hasn't taken a line on those 7 shadow ministers, and also Anas Sarwar, the leader of the Labour Party in Scotland, Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester, all of whom who have broken ranks with Keir Starmer on the issue of the ceasefire. Perhaps because Keir Starmer has felt he can't move with the divisions over the position on the ceasefire, he has moved on Andy McDonald and this chant from the river to the sea.
And just to let you guys at home listening and viewing, where do you stand on a pause in hostilities or a ceasefire? Let us know your views on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk to the COVID inquiry, which is taking place just round the corner from where we sit today, and it's going to get spicy. Dominic Cummings, and no love lost between him and Boris Johnson.
Halloween fright.
Yeah, yeah.
Certainly. We're seeing both Dominic Cummings and Lee Kane, 2 of the most powerful people in Downing Street over particularly that summer of 2020, when we've been seeing a lot of these WhatsApps come out over the last day or so. And it is fascinating. Lee Kane was meant to be speaking yesterday, but he's been bumped to today because the questioning of Martin Reynolds, some might know him as Party Marty, because of that invite that he sent out for drinks in the Downing Street Garden.
He looked like a man who would enjoy a party, really, when I saw him appear at the
I look like a kind of Westminster man that would enjoy a party. It's a certain look,
well, it's interesting.
isn't it?
A lot of the photos that we've seen subsequently released in the press of the parties that occurred in Downing Street didn't seem particularly party-like. But of course, it's the issue of the mixing of individuals rather than how fun the parties actually were. But it is interesting. His questioning stretched on far longer than anyone was expecting, meaning that now we've got this double bill of 2 very, very important people today, and no doubt we're going to see some more revelations. We did see some pretty extraordinary revelations from a man named Simon Case. Now, he's still one of the top honchos in the civil service today, but also was, of course, at the time of Boris Johnson's premiership. And there were some extraordinarily candid WhatsApps that were released yesterday, no doubt written without the intention that these would ever be made public, about what he described as the indecisiveness of the Prime Minister, talking about how the Prime Minister was sort of shifting from one position to another throughout the course of the summer of 2020. And something that's been really picked up on, perhaps quite damning, is the suggestion that Boris Johnson wanted to change the restrictions that the country was under in order to distract from the Dominic Cummings Barnard Castle scandal. Now, whatever your view on whether we should have had more restrictions or less restrictions, the idea that they should have been shifted as a result of politics rather than epidemiology will no doubt run cold for some people.
Well,
George
Boris
Osborne was saying that Johnson's going to come in for a lot of criticism next week as more and more revelations come out.
Is he coming out in the COVID inquiry next week? Is that when will we hear from Boris Johnson in this, or...?
I don't think we've got a timing for Boris Johnson yet. We will, of course, be hearing from him in the inquiry at some point, but I don't think we've got yet a date.
And Sir Patrick Vallance yesterday saying the country was in a deeply unfortunate position when the pandemic hit, with a weak and indecisive PM. Not many favourable headlines in relation to Boris Johnson today, following on from that.
Certainly not. Certainly not. And I suppose there is an element where people sort of do want to shift blame around and will be looking to put decisions on other people. And, of course, we're hearing partial accounts from individuals as things go on. One of the most interesting things, I think, today will be how will the questioners treat Dominic Cummings? Because Dominic Cummings, of course, is a man who is very controversial in the country, but also loathes Boris Johnson. And it will be very interesting to see which tack the questioning takes with regard to what Dominic Cummings says and how much credence it's given.
Well, one thing can be certain, is that he will have been preparing for today for weeks and weeks and weeks. So it will be fireworks. It will be Halloween fireworks indeed. Tom, thank you very much. We'll see more of you a little bit later on in the programme.
Thank you. The time, 6:15. This is Breakfast on GB News. Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel, Webster.
And here's a reminder of our top stories this morning. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, saying it would amount to a surrender to Hamas and reiterating this is a time for war.
The Dam Busters HQ protests in a High Court case today over whether 2,000 migrants will be housed at RAF Scampton, where the Dam Buster raids were launched from.
Should we be punished when our children misbehave? One restaurant added $50 to a couple's bill in America because of their badly behaved children. We'll be debating that around 7:20.
You see, I think that's a bit much. I mean, you can have...
I'm pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
I thought you'd be like, yeah, the little terrors. Although you're so sweet with my kids, but on planes you can't bear them. But restaurants?
Well, no. At times, I do think it is the responsibility of the parents to basically scare the life out of their children that they're fearful to doing anything wrong. I think that's right. But I don't think that... I think it's opportunism from a restaurant. Who are you to impose a financial penalty on someone? Throw them out. If you don't like them, stop them spending money in your place and say, get out.
Yeah, if someone's drunk and disorderly, is that, finable? Or if somebody's smoking, therefore causing passive smoking on the outside of your restaurant for the people sitting there as well, do you fine them? Why is it parents that always get it in the neck?
Why are children even allowed in restaurants?
Why are children allowed to breathe?
That is the question. So the point is, when you were young, I mean, we didn't have restaurants in my day. There were no restaurants.
We barely went out to restaurants when I was little.
Nobody went out to a restaurant. But let's just say, so with my children, yes, it was all crayons. You had to get them blooming crayons. So you had to eat while they had blooming crayons and drawing books and all sorts of things. Simple. Don't bring them. Don't bring them.
Where am I supposed to leave them?
Leave them in a house, locked up in a cupboard or something.
We all go out to restaurants more than we did a generation ago. It's just part of life. And, I really do believe children should be seen, should be part of society. You see it in places like Spain and Italy. No, that's very much the French view. You go anywhere in France with your kids and they're like, ugh, ugh. But you go to Spain and the restaurant waitresses come up and they make you feel relaxed. And I actually think the children behave better.
Good. You be in that restaurant. I'm going to be in a little restaurant. I was in, where was I in? Yorkshire at the weekend. And there was a marvellous restaurant. You had to book for your breakfast to be there and there were no children allowed.
Well, that's also wonderful. I totally understand that. No, I do
totally wonderful. And you're right. I sat there and I thought, does nobody cook anymore at home? Nobody does. Nobody does.
Right, we're going to move on now and talk about the latest possible setback for government plans to move asylum seekers out of hotels and into cheaper accommodation.
High Court is about to hear a case from West Lindsey District Council which wants to stop 2,000 migrants being housed at, you'll have heard of this, the RAF Scampton, which was former home of the famous Dam Busters.
Well, it follows another legal challenge from Braintree District Council to block Home Office plans to house asylum seekers at the former site of RAF Wethersfield.
Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis, more on this.
The noise from the days of the RAF has disappeared, but this corner of Lincolnshire is far from quiet.
It is a bit loud. I'll switch it off now for you.
A base once used for protecting Britain, now Mandy says she doesn't feel safe living in Scampton. She's installed bigger fences and security cameras. And she's not alone. Rachel is worried too.
I go to bed at night, think about it. If I wake up in the night, I'll think about it.
It's the fear of the unknown, isn't it?
In a matter of months, their lives have changed. But they haven't given up yet.
We're going to the end of this road where we're going to show our banners.
Home of 617 Squadron, the Dam Buster raids started right here.
They are sure to be remembered in all histories of the war. They did a magnificent job.
Now the Home Office is preparing Scampton for a new purpose.
The government will use military sites being disposed of in Essex and Lincolnshire and will collectively provide accommodation to several thousand asylum seekers.
The government says it will ease the need for hotels, which is costing £8 million a day. The judicial review is essentially a test to see whether the Home Office can legally house asylum seekers at RAF Scampton and Wethersfield. West Lindsey District Council says the Home Office is breaking the rules by housing migrants at airbases. Sally is the Director of Planning and Regeneration.
The government have committed to making these sites safe, legal and compliant, and until the Home Office can provide the evidence that that is the case, we will continue to challenge and seek assurance that that's what they're able to deliver on this site.
The government says it is meeting planning requirements. But charities have also opposed plans, with the Refugee Council describing airbases as unsuitable for migrants. The journey toward the judicial review has been bumpy. Mandy and Rachel say this has taken over their lives.
Everything I talk about is about this. No matter who I'm with, I talk about this.
The review could be the beginning of the end, or perhaps only the ending of the beginning. Will Hollis, GB News in Scampton.
Now, I admire those ladies doing what they're doing, but I would just say this, right? What is Scampton used for today? If it's a museum or commemorative place for the dam busters, fantastic, and you can set that aside and whatever. But what difference does it make, I put it out there to you, whether migrants are being housed there or not? Maybe that's putting it all to a very good use. What do you think?
Well, let's see what the High Court say. I think it'd be hard to persuade a judge that it's any use to anybody boarded up as it is at the moment. But let's see how that all plays out. Meanwhile, more misery in terms of weather. Flooding has now hit parts of Northern Ireland and people have been warned not to travel there. Heavy rain and weather warnings are now set to dominate much of the UK for most of this week, I think until Thursday. So let's take a look at all the weather details now.
Good morning. Whilst there's some fine weather across parts of Scotland, elsewhere it's going to be a changeable day this Tuesday. I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast. Heavy showery rain overnight continuing for a time across eastern parts of Northern Ireland. Could be some difficulties on the roads this morning, so do take care. Elsewhere, showery rain across many parts of England and Wales through the day, but some drier, brighter weather for a time before some wet and windy weather pushes in from the southwest later. Drier and brighter across parts of Scotland, but chilly here. Temperatures struggling, milder in the south with highs of around 14 or 15 Celsius. If you're going trick-or-treating this evening, there will be a band of rain pushing its way up from the southwest, but more northern areas staying drier for longer. But that wet and windy weather will sweep its way northwards across the bulk of the UK as we go through the early hours of Wednesday. For many, it will be a relatively mild night because of the wind and the rain, but a touch of frost possible in the far north of Scotland. That wind and rain then continues for many as we go through Wednesday. It could be heavy and persistent at times, particularly across northern areas, with then showery spells following in behind across the rest of the country, and some of these showers could be heavy with some rumbles of thunder mixed in too. Notice the beginnings of Storm Ciarán starting to push its way in from the southwest later on. Temperatures nothing really to write home about, especially because of the blustery, unsettled weather that many of us will have. Looking ahead then, yes, Storm Ciarán coming in, affecting southern parts to end the week, bringing some exceptionally strong winds.
Do you want to give us the correct pronunciation of the
Ciarán.
storm?
Ciarán.
He's been rolling his eyes this morning at all of us that can't
Because there's a little
pronounce
fada
them.
over it, there's a little accent over it, so people think they've got to do what you do with Macron. So it's Ciarán. It's Ciarán.
Storm Ciarán.
Storm Ciarán.
I'll tell you.
End of.
All right.
As I actually phoned my friend Ciarán last night
Did
to
you?
ask
Of course you did.
Say, what's all this Ciarán that people are doing? Oh, people really annoy me. Linguistics annoy me.
I know.
They annoy me. People
I know.
pretentiousness.
No, it's not. It's just within the 6-mile radius of Bangor and Belfast, there are other ways of pronouncing things.
Oh, so you're criticising us Ulster people
Saying
and
you're
what
a
we
little-
stand for?
No, you're just laughing at accents.
Well, I wasn't laughing. There were sheep yesterday drowning in fields yesterday.
Oh no, well I
It
tried
was
to go
very
for a
sad.
walk yesterday and my kids couldn't
Then
get
the
through
sheep
the path.
drowning.
We had to go round the trees. It was
Yeah.
very wet out there.
I don't think it'll be very wet in Kenya. The King and Queen are there. They are undertaking their first state visit since they were made top dogs.
Sovereigns, yeah.
Yeah, and we'll be going there next.
Can't wait.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
party this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Like a bit of a state visit, and the King and Queen are in Kenya today. And the East African nation is celebrating 60 years of independence from Britain. I find it strange that you're invited to go along and be all joyous because they said, we booted you out. It's great, 60 years since we booted you out.
But we've kept very much, they're in the Commonwealth, aren't they? Very close. All of our army go and train there still. We're very connected to Kenya.
Very connected.
And of course, the Queen was there, wasn't she, when she learnt that she was to become the Queen. Her father passed away, and Prince William proposed to Kate there.
Did he?
Yeah, up in the mountains. So they love Kenya.
Something in the air.
Yes.
So anyway, the royals flew into Nairobi. Nairobi is the capital of Kenya, or is it Kenya?
Kenya's fine.
No, but I'm just wondering, is it because you get people? Yeah, I'd say it's Kenya, but I've heard it pronounced Kenya.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Kenya.
It's a 5-day visit, and it's been reported that Charles will acknowledge the painful aspects of the UK and Kenya's shared history.
Well, our royal correspondent Cameron Walker has this overview.
Nairobi, Kenya's capital, was in sunny mood for the visit of Princess Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh.
Britain and Kenya have historical ties, but the world is changing. America, Russia and China all reportedly want more influence in the African region, once part of the British Empire. Perhaps unsurprisingly, trade, culture and King Charles's favourite, sustainability, are high on the agenda for this week's state visit. The King and Queen have been invited by President Ruto as Kenya prepares to celebrate 60 years of independence from Britain. A convenient excuse for the Foreign Office to turn on the Royal Charm offensive to strengthen ties with its strategic ally. Professor Chris Imafidon was invited to Buckingham Palace last week for a reception celebrating Kenyan diaspora in the UK.
The people came together to realise that not only does the destiny of the UK lies with the Kenyan youths that will provide the energy, the enthusiasm and their love for digital world, but this is more important, the safari has to be preserved for the next generation. And the king is always going on about this ecological preservation.
It was at Kenya's Treetop Safari Lodge in 1952 when King Charles's mother arrived as a princess and departed as queen. But the 1950s had a darker side too. The Mau Mau uprising opposed British rule, and white farmers were targeted in violent attacks. In response, an estimated 90,000 Kenyans were executed, tortured or injured by British rulers, according to the Kenyan Human Rights Commission. Campaigners want the king to publicly apologise.
After the apologies, we also expect
a reparation.
But a decade ago, the British government did pay out nearly £20 million to Kenyans for human rights abuses. And the King is expected to acknowledge what's been described by his Deputy Private Secretary as the more painful aspects of the UK and Kenya's shared history. But there are fears this could open a can of worms.
Apologies are not appropriate at this point in time, and I think the King is fully aware of that. He, of course, has expressed regrets in the past in Barbados and in Canada for Britain's colonial past, and I see no problem with him continuing to do that. But apologies are a different issue because they do open the doors for reparations.
Palace and government aides will be determined not to have a repeat of Prince William and Princess Catherine's trip to the Caribbean, which was partly overshadowed with calls for reparations and a formal apology for historical slavery. Their focus is on King Charles's visits to a Commonwealth country, his first as monarch and as head of a family of nations. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Well, we're going to have more for you on that royal visit in just a moment. But first of all, a reminder of our top stories as the time strikes 6:31.
Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has rejected calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, saying it would amount to a surrender to Hamas and reiterating this is a time for war.
Battle over Dam Busters HQ, protests and a High Court case today over whether 2,000 migrants will be housed at RAF Scampton, home to the famous Dam Buster pilots.
And should we be punished when children misbehave? One restaurant added $50 to a couple's bill in the USA because of their badly behaved children.
Now, as we promised, more now from the King's visit to Kenya. Joined we are this morning by the royal commentator Michael Cole. Good morning to you, Michael. You know, I feel a little bit like with the coronation of the King, there were a few people that were perhaps Republicans, but actually it shouldn't overshadow the visit. And perhaps, you know, we shouldn't necessarily start by talking about colonialism and all of that, because this is, you know, a big moment for the royal pair going out to their first Commonwealth country, and a special place in their heart it has as well.
Indeed, Isabel. Good morning, Isabel, and good morning, Eamonn. There is a great shared history, and you mentioned the fact that the Prince of Wales did propose to Kate Middleton as she was, having carefully taken with him on that trip his mother's engagement ring of sapphires and diamonds, and found a beautiful starry night on a mountainside to propose. And amazingly, she said yes. And there we have the Prince and Princess of Wales. There are pictures of the King. This is his first visit to a Commonwealth country. He is head of the Commonwealth. And it will be acknowledged, the past shared history and painful aspects of it. But I think it will stop well short of an apology. The problem is that an apology opens a door and lots of lawyers run through it, waiving writs and calculating their fees and suing for past wrongs. Now, the Mau Mau struggle, which I quite clearly remember as a child listening to it all, was a very horrible, savage and brutal affair that went on for 10 years. At least 11,000 so-called freedom fighters, Mau Mau activists were killed. And on the other side, 32 white settlers were brutally murdered, and some 1,800 loyalist Africans were also slaughtered. Now, the King is going to acknowledge all that. He's going to visit a museum dedicated to that freedom struggle and lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown warrior in Uhuru Gardens. Now, Uhuru, Swahili word for freedom, and that's what it was all about. I think as a fan of the Jeeves and Wooster stories, I rather suspect the King will agree with P.G. Wodehouse, the author, who said, "It is a good rule in life never to apologize. The right sort of people do not want apologies, and the wrong sort take a mean advantage of them." So I don't believe there will be an apology, but there will be plenty of expressions of regret. And you had some also, another aspect of it, which I think is important, you have some lovely pictures of elephants. The Queen's late brother dedicated the last part of his life to elephant conservation. He died quite recently, and I'm quite sure there'll be an accent upon that.
The Queen's late brother, forgive me, I'm sitting here scratching my head.
Yeah, he died last year, and he spent her brother. Yeah,
The
yeah,
Queen.
she had a brother.
Oh, sorry, we're thinking Her Majesty the Queen, the late Queen. You're talking about the Dutch, the
Oh, you're talking about the
Yeah,
present
we were all
Queen.
thinking, what?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. The current Queen. It's very early.
Right.
We're with you.
Queen Camilla.
Indeed, of course.
Her brother was very, very big into elephants. And there'll be accents upon that also on youth development and conservation and the usual things that the King is very keen on. And it's going to be a very interesting visit because, as I say, first one to a Commonwealth country. His first visits were to Germany, of course, and then on to France, both of them highly successful. And there is this shared history. Of course, there's a lot of pain from the past, and it has to be properly acknowledged, and it will be. But, of course, everything the King says publicly, every utterance, will be agreed by the government. He will not speak against the government policy. And back in 2013, which was the 50th anniversary of Kenyan independence, the Foreign Secretary, then William Hague, also expressed regret and made a comprehensive mea culpa about the past atrocities which there were on both sides, massacres on both sides. And as your excellent report made the point, £20 million was paid out to 528, I think it was, people who had been suffered during that Mau Mau emergency.
Michael, thank you very much indeed for that potted history and your perspective there. Really appreciate it. World commentator Michael Cole there. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Just you doubting that he knew what he was talking about.
You both mouthed to me, the Queen's brother, and I agreed. I was like, what? Just ask the question, no one else. If we were thinking it, surely people at home. I feel like Queen Camilla, it needs to be said as Queen Camilla, otherwise I think the Queen Elizabeth II.
Golden balls. We're going to talk about the biggest golden ball.
Is that me, by the way?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, the Ballon, as Isabel would say. I would say golden balls. Isabel would say the Ballon d'Or.
Well, she is correct, because it was held at the Théâtre de Châtelet in Paris last night. And it was very nice.
Look at that. Who's
there we are. Look at that. The great and the good of football that were at the theatre last night for the Ballon d'Or, the greatest footballer of the world. There's Lionel Messi. He was the man that won it for the 8th time. They're all the shortlisted people there. And people... Now, there's Jude Bellingham. Now, Jude Bellingham, 20 years old, wins the award, which is the Copa Trophy for the incredible player, best player under 21, and he will win the main Ballon d'Or. That's Eden Hazard there, who retired this year, handing over the award. Now this man, look at that suit. That is one suit. That's how I was going to be dressed today. That's the great Vinicius Junior from Real Madrid. Now he won the award, which was the Socrates Award for the charity work he's done and to fight against racism. Now that's we've got Manchester City there that won the Best Team Award, so there they are, picking that up, and there's plenty of players that are all nominated as well for the Ballon d'Or. And also we've got the Ballon d'Or, the Women's Award, that's Aitana Bonmati from Spain. Yeah. Mary Earps, our goalkeeper, came 5th, by the way, in that one, so there she is picking up her award. And then the main one, there we are. I mean, it's the thing is...
who's who of the world,
It's the glitterati of football. I think that's probably her mum and dad. I imagine that's her mum and dad.
Djokovic in the wings there.
He was there, yeah. And even announced him. I don't know why. He doesn't play football, but there we are. Everybody standing to the great Lionel Messi, who wins it for the 8th time. There's his wife. Another award that we've got to find another space for, Lionel. What are we going to do? Erling Haaland there on the left.
See him. Yeah.
He came 2nd, and also in 3rd place you could see Kylian Mbappe, who scored a hat-trick in the... Look at that. Messi is infinity. And the greatest, arguably, the greatest footballer that there's ever been. What a player.
Fabulous.
What a player.
Lovely award ceremony.
And what a game. What a game. Just to, that we're so blessed to follow football.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I was at a Ballon d'Or once.
Were you really?
Yeah, I was, yeah.
What year was this? Who was there? Did you see how close?
I did.
Did you see how close I came? And then I pulled back. I went for it, and then I thought, no.
Well, that's a red card for you. You're off now.
I'll never play again. I'm out of this club.
If there was a test to prove if you and your partner were in love, would you take it?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I think I'd pass. We'll be discussing that and more.
I think I am a magnificent catch for anyone.
Absolutely.
I do have no difficulty with that.
Whether Ruth agrees is another matter.
After this.
More after this.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows, Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Anna Mikalova and Alex Armstrong here to go through the papers with us this morning. Anna, we start with you. What have you got?
Well, we've got the COVID inquiry kicking off this week.
Well, that's going to be some watch, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dominic Cummings today.
It is. Everyone can tune in, grab their popcorn. I mean, all the details are already coming out. It's absolutely extraordinary. You would just never, ever get this level of insight into how government works and how much...
They all hate each other.
They all hate each other. They all hate
It's almost worse than you feared.
I know, and you know, we all say things about our bosses occasionally, but to have them all just displayed like this is absolutely mortifying.
Yeah, and he's looking like Uncle Fester this morning, isn't he, on this Halloween? So he will be attack against Boris Johnson.
Yeah, he's going to go. I think we'll get the Dominic Cummings classics today. Boris Johnson, Matt Hancock being awful, the civil service being awful. I imagine Carrie, of course. I think we'll get the greatest hits. I'm not sure how much new he has to say, frankly, but the detail will be interesting.
What about Lee Kane? You know, he was a big part of all of this. He got bumped over to today because yesterday went on so long with Party Marty. What are you expecting from that?
Yeah, I mean, I felt his quite a humorous response to some of the WhatsApp messages where I think he put a shopping trolley to describe Boris Johnson. I mean, look, I think what's fascinating about all of this is that there's a lot of assumptions already made about what the outcome should have been from COVID. Like, it seems to me that there's been an agreement that lockdowns were the correct direction. So I think there's going to be a lot of attack on the government on, like, we should have done all of these things earlier rather than were these the right things. So I'll be interested to see how Lee and others navigate that sort of water of whether this is the correct decision or not.
OK. Flying into a rage at work like the Incredible Hulk. Superstar chef Gordon Ramsay could hold the secret to achieving your goals, Alex. This is his son.
Yes, fascinating read, isn't it? And look, I've worked with many big sort of tech moguls in my time, a couple famous ones such as the CEO of Uber, and they are famous for flying down corridors and screaming and shouting at people. Absolutely fascinating, because in my experience, it does actually motivate some people to get off their backsides and get things done quicker. The sort of flip side of this is that it can be a little bit despairing to work for those people, and you get a lot of high turnover. But clearly the research shows, and the scientists, I think it was in Cambridge or somewhere, have said that it does seem to work, at least in a sports environment.
Yeah.
Gordon Ramsay's not a sports person.
No, but I mean, I think they're using him in The Sun as an example.
He has that philosophy as well, that he will criticise and he will abuse, and then he will hug whoever achieves what he wants them to achieve. Alex Ferguson said to me that he could not manage in today's environment because there's too much HR control, too many people's feelings to take into consideration.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a bit of a snowflake environment now at work. I see it all the time.
Same.
And I think that, that really doesn't lend itself to being quite an innovative environment. You're just not allowed to say what you want to say. You've got to tiptoe around people.
Yeah, I mean, at what point did it become a taboo to seek excellence and to call out poor work?
Quite right, Isabel.
That's suddenly a punishable offence. Shall we...
This new sci-fi series, let's talk about this, coming to Apple TV. It's called Fingernails, Anna. It's about love and AI. Tell us more.
So it's this very glossy new show with an absolutely A-list cast list, and it looks like it's taking on this quite interesting sci-fi theme of what happens if you let artificial technology pick and choose your partner and essentially design your life. And the quick premise is taking the risk out of love. So to make it that there will never be any divorce, never be any split. And
what do you think about that? I mean, I think love's such a funny thing. I mean, this is what all the dating apps argue, isn't it? That you should never leave the biggest and most important decision of your life, who you have your children with, ultimately down to lust.
Also, all the fun is in the risk.
Because actually lust is very short-term, and this is supposed to be a lifelong partnership. So what you need is an algorithm which will look at your background, your views on politics, your religion, your education level, your interests.
Biologically compatible, mentally compatible, spiritually compatible.
Yeah, so can AI take that up a notch?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think that'll lead to more happiness in the world.
I don't think so. I think part of the... part of what people enjoy is the actual... taking the risk out of love doesn't make sense because the whole fun and interest is in the risk. It is in the...
Have you been lucky in love? I put it to you. If you've been unlucky in love, then you wouldn't agree with that. Have you been particularly lucky in love?
I haven't been unlucky, I think. But I think life is still going on. So.
I'd love to leave it to a computer, personally.
Well, I think why does it have to be one thing or the other? As in, you could basically get AI to come up with a few possible options for you, and then you go for the one you fancy the most. So you still have the lust.
Yeah.
And you still have the algorithms. The idea that you just go for the tallest, swaggiest guy in the bar, disaster.
Yeah, I think Black Mirror also did a really good episode on this, where they sort of let the AI find someone for you through this algorithm, where it's sort of these odd ways of meeting someone. Like the AI might tell you to go and sit on a certain bench at this time for your lunch. I don't know if it's a bit creepy. We'll see.
Alex, we will see. Guys, just to put all your thoughts on hold there at the moment, we've got the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Roads and Local Transport. He is Richard Holden, speaking on behalf of the government today. Mr. Holden, good morning to you. Very nice to see you.
Morning, Eamonn. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing okay today. If I was what's his name, who none of us know, what was his name?
Paul Bristow.
Paul Bristow. How would you be feeling if you were him today? Was it right that he got the red card for asking for a ceasefire in the Israeli-Gaza conflict?
Well, I know Paul very well, and I think it was the right thing to happen. I think you have to have a collective government responsibility. You have to have a collective position, and Paul didn't feel that he could maintain that. So, rightly has been moved because of that. I think that's really important. I think what we've actually seen over the last few weeks is actually right across the House of Commons, really, generally a pretty coherent approach to support and defend Israel's right to self-defense following those horrific, terrorist attacks, the worst days for Israel and for the Jewish community, really, since the Holocaust, in terms of there's huge losses of life. And I think in those circumstances, it's right that Paul stepped down.
It's interesting because he said it was difficult to understand how the situation as it stands makes Israel more secure or indeed makes anything better. He's throwing a challenge ultimately, or he did in his two-page letter to the Prime Minister. And I just wonder whether you think history will judge on his side or not.
Sorry, I missed the second part of your question.
I just wonder whether you think history will look favourable on the decision or not of Rishi Sunak for sacking him in this.
No, I think in the end you can't have a ceasefire when one side's just been attacked in the worst terrorist attack for the since the Holocaust, right? I don't think that's possible. That's my view, that's the government's view, because a ceasefire involves the laying down of arms. I didn't see the same people calling for a ceasefire after after the Americans were attacked on 9/11, or after London was bombed, or after Madrid was bombed. I think it's really important, actually, that we see this in the context it is, in which Israel has been subject to one of the worst terrorist attacks, in living memory.
It was absolutely. Nobody will refute that, really. But the thing is, Richard, it's just where does it end? And the fact that so many, not hundreds, but thousands of children will die and continue to die in all of this. It's just, I wouldn't like to be in a position where I'm having to make that decision. But by not instigating a ceasefire, we are confining, those children are doomed to die.
Look, I would also say, Eamonn, the UK government has made it very clear that we want to see a humanitarian pause to allow people out of the Gaza Strip, but also aid to get in. That's our position, and we've been very, very clear on that. But I think a ceasefire is something completely different. A ceasefire basically involves Israel having faced one of the worst terrorist attacks ever, then just laying down its arms. That only benefits one side. That shows that terrorism wins, and I don't think that can be our position. I think Israel has every right to defend itself. If this had happened to the UK, what we'd have seen would have been thousands and thousands of UK nationals dragged off abroad and taken hostage. We'd have seen tens of thousands of people, those are the population equivalents, killed here on the streets of the UK. We need to be able to see it in that context.
Okay.
You're
Richard,
right,
Richard, there are other things
any of us wants to have to be involved in.
There are other things, however insignificant they may seem, and how can we talk about poverty being insignificant in comparison, but though it may well be. Nearly 15 million people living in poverty in this country. Those are the latest figures. What are you going to do about that?
Well, one of the things that we're doing at the moment, and I think that's relative poverty, so that's all related to the percentage of the average earnings that a household has, because we have seen some actually big falls, particularly in absolute poverty around children in particular over the last few years. But I think the key thing that I want to see happen is that, and we've seen it's been really tough for a lot of people, particularly during the cost of living issues following the inflation we've seen right across the world following the end of COVID and the war in Ukraine. I think what we want to do is help people wherever we can. That's why the government over the last few years has put over £90 billion into really helping. It's up to £3,300 per household for many, many households across the country. We've got some extra cash going in at the moment, some more payments for 8 million of the most vulnerable households, £300 each going in. That's the second of 3 tranches of £300 to really help people particularly with the cost of heating remaining so high. And on the other side, I, as Minister for Roads and Local Transport, am great to see the £2 bus fare scheme extended for a lot of people in low-paid work. The bus is how they get around. It's the most popular form of public transport. We're extending that all the way through to the end of December next year to really help households. Also, it's giving inflation down as well.
Yeah,
so we've got measures going in there to help families.
Yes, and great to see that cap extended, and as you say, a very popular form of transport. But you tell that to people who are seeing their bus services reduced or indeed cancelled, particularly in rural areas. It's all very well extending the cap, but actually, what are you doing to make sure that those services continue to be provided for the people that rely on them?
No, I think you actually make the really good point there. We've got to do two things. When people come to me and say, this is the issues we're facing, one is affordability. That's why we've got that cap in there all the way through now to the end of next year. And we've also, on the other side, we've put hundreds of millions of pounds extra into support bus services right across the country through two schemes, Bus Service Improvement Plan and Bus Service Improvement Plan Plus. Local councils right across the country are getting that money. It's totaled over £3.5 billion already since the start of the pandemic, when we had to see real issues. People weren't able to travel on our bus network. And just last week, the Prime Minister announced the first tranche of over £1 billion of money going in to support bus networks over the next 5 years, which has been freed up because of the cancellation of HS2. So the first 150 million of £1 billion announced just last week for buses in the Midlands and the North. No government has invested like this government has invested over the last few years and continues to invest in our bus network, certainly not for decades.
But Richard, that's because you've axed HS2 and a lot of the dreams and things that were around that. But I thought, this is what I don't understand about the HS2 budget. So we can't build HS2 because we can't afford it. So then we take the money that we can't afford, that we don't have in the first place, and we give it out to the sort of schemes that you're talking about there. So we either have the money or we don't have the money.
So I think that the truth is, Eamonn, that over 20 years you'll be talking around, £1.5 to £2 billion a year spending on the HS2 project. The question is that the best place to spend the money?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And my view and the government's view is actually the best place to spend the money is out there right across the country on transport schemes that affect everybody's daily lives, rather than on the scheme from Lichfield to Manchester.
Understood. We really have to say goodbye, though. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Richard Holden. Appreciate it. We'll say goodbye. Back in just a moment.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
A very good morning to you. It's about to turn 7 o'clock on Tuesday, the 31st of October. It's Halloween. You're going trick-or-treating?
I think your costume looks brilliant today. I think you look super for the whole thing. Well, it's not.
This is me rolling my eyes. You were talking about that. I was like,
Does that nose come off, that witch?
oh, stop it! How dare you? How very dare you? Yeah, this is Breakfast with Eamonn Holmes, the #1 insulter, and me, Isabel Webster. And here's what's leading the news this morning.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called for a ceasefire in Gaza, saying he's rejected calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, I should say, saying it would amount to a surrender to Hamas, and reiterating this is a time for war. We go to Tel Aviv. Mark White is there for us.
Well, Israeli military say that their ground and air forces have struck more than 300 targets in the past 24 hours as they continue to push ahead with their ground invasion.
In the UK, divisions are flaring over Israel's war on Hamas. The Prime Minister has sacked MP Paul Bristow from a government position for defying the PM by calling for a ceasefire.
A big day in the COVID inquiry. Boris Johnson's former advisor Dominic Cummings will give his damning evidence about how the government handled the hugely controversial pandemic. That's today.
A battle over Dambusters HQ, protests and a High Court case today over whether 2,000 migrants will be housed at RAF Scampton, home to the famous Dambuster pilots.
And Paul Coit has got all show busy in sport, award ceremonies.
I'm always all show busy in sport. You know that. 2 Tales of Paris, one of them the good side, that's Lionel Messi winning the Ballon d'Or, and the bad side, that's Andy Murray getting very upset and smashing his racket in the Paris Masters.
Ooh.
Yeah, very upset.
How very traditional.
It's very, very traditional. Very tricky, less treaty.
So it's all happening in Paris.
It is. Well, it's a trick and a treat, you see. I guess the treat is the Lionel and the... I'm working on it. I'm working
That's
on it.
happening in Paris. What's happening over here with your weather? Alex Burker will have your details.
Storm Kieran's arriving later tomorrow, but before then we have some wet and windy weather around today as well. I'll have more later.
Also this morning we are bringing you to Kenya with the King and Queen. It's the start of a 4-day state visit.
Yes, it's their first visit to a Commonwealth country since the coronation, and of course it's where the late Queen's reign began back in February 1952.
If you've got memories of that, if you've got views about, what's the word they use? Not repatriate,
reparations?
Reparations, yeah, for British colonialism. Let us know, gbviews@gbnews.com, because there is talk about there should be reparations for all of that. Or tweet at GBNews. Be good to hear from you.
So our top story this morning is the UK becoming more divided over Israel's war on Hamas. The Prime Minister's message is that the country does stand united with Israel.
But there are increasing numbers turning out for pro-Palestinian protests. It stretches police resources, while rebel Conservative and Labour MPs are demanding a total ceasefire.
Well, that has cost this MP his job. If you're listening on the radio, we're looking at a picture of Paul Bristow. Downing Street say his comments demanding a full ceasefire were not consistent with the principles of collective responsibility.
Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected calls for a ceasefire, saying it would amount to a surrender to Hamas, and cited the Bible, saying this is a time for war.
Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th. Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism, to surrender to barbarism. That will not happen.
The UN charity UNICEF says 420 children are being injured or killed in Gaza every day by the bombing.
Let's go to our security editor, Mark White, in Tel Aviv for more on that. Mark.
Yes, good morning. We've got in the last half an hour or so confirmation from the Israeli military that they have struck more than 300 Hamas targets inside Gaza with a combination of their combat troops on the ground and also their aerial strikes. They are continuing to push forward slowly and meticulously is the words they are using. They are encountering as they go resistance from those Hamas terrorists in a number of positions. Now they say, the Israeli military that is, that they have taken out a number of these positions and killed dozens of Hamas terrorists. We're not on the ground. We've no way of independently verifying this, but this is what the IDF are telling us this morning. The Red Crescent, the Palestinian Red Crescent, who are on the ground in Gaza, say that there has been very significant aerial bombardment of the area around the Al-Quds hospital in northern Gaza. And while this ground operation is continuing in Israel's northern border and to the south, troops there are on high alert as well. There were a number of missiles and rockets that were fired over the border from southern Lebanon yesterday as those Hezbollah fighters and associated groups up there stepped up, it seems, their activities across that border. And in the south, just in the last few minutes, the air raid sirens have sounded around Eilat, where a drone or some other kind of aerial aircraft has been spotted entering Israeli airspace. So Israeli fighter jets trying to deal with that as we speak.
Mark, thanks very
What does that feel like, Mark, when that siren goes off and you hear that? Do you take those seriously?
We do. It has become a bit routine, to be honest. I've got this phone here. You might be able to see it if Ben can get in right up towards the top there. It just says critical alert. I think that's the Gaza envelope it's saying there. So that basically just sort of rings all the time, really. Which is a bit annoying, but we've got to have it on because you just never know if it's an alert for the Tel Aviv area. And when that alert goes, if it's in our central Tel Aviv area, because, you know, it's an incredible system, we can have attacks that are targeting the north, the south, the east of Tel Aviv, but not in our central area. And we're okay. We then watch from the balcony of the building that we're in at the moment, those Iron Dome missile defense systems going up into the air and taking out those Hamas rockets. So it's become routine, but you don't ignore it. If the sirens go off, you've got to run to the shelter.
OK, Mark, thank you very much for painting a picture for us. We say goodbye to Mark in Tel Aviv and we focus on things a bit more domestically now and how things are working politically on this thorny issue. The Tory MP, Paul Bristow, was sacked as a minister by the Prime Minister yesterday after publicly urging Rishi Sunak to push for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza.
On the Labour front, they have an MP called Andy MacDonald. He's been suspended by Keir Starmer. For the latest on all of this, GBNews Deputy Political Editor Tom Harwood. Oof. So what is the situation? Ceasefire, pause?
Well, this is the crucial distinction. And it might not sound like a big distinction, but to the leadership of both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party it is. A humanitarian pause would mean being able to get aid in, refugees out temporarily, but not ending what the British government's view is Israel's right to defend itself, not enabling Hamas to then build up its powers again and carry out another massacre of Jewish people as we saw 3 weeks ago. That's the big worry that both the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition have. If we just say stop fighting, Hamas is a terrorist organisation as designated by this government, the EU, the US. Would they really abide by that sort of ceasefire, or would they just build up their capacity again and carry out another massacre? That is the worry. And so it's easy to see then how this distinction between a pause versus a permanent ceasefire can actually be something that in the eyes of many people is quite dangerous. So even though it might sound semantically very similar, it's a crucial distinction, which is why Rishi Sunak really took that quick and swift decision to really sack one of his ministers today. But on the other side of the aisle, we've seen more equivocation. The Labour Party's had more divisions, I think it's fair to say, over this issue. No fewer than 7 shadow ministers have been calling for a ceasefire against the diktat of Keir Starmer, and he hasn't sacked one of them. The sacking that we saw yesterday of Andy MacDonald was over something that he said at a rally, using the phrase "from the river to the sea," rather than calling for a ceasefire. Now, the phrase "river to the sea" can be used in part of one of these very contentious charges chants that we've been hearing on a lot of marches. In full, it goes, "From the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free." And that implies from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea, there won't be a state of Israel. It will only be Palestine, eradicating the state of Israel from the face of the map, seen as a deeply anti-Semitic statement. Now, Andy McDonald didn't use the full phrase, but he did use the words "from the river to the sea," and for many Jewish people, that has grave implications. So he has been, the whip has been removed from him as a Labour MP, but again, those 7 shadow ministers of the Labour Party have not lost their jobs. So there is a bit more division in the Labour Party, and I think the Conservative Party see this as an opportunity to be more united, which is why Paul Bristow lost his ministerial job yesterday.
Do you see more of these kinds of divisions emerging, though? I mean, there are lots of British people with links to Palestine who were trapped there and can't get out. I heard yesterday about a case study of a teacher who was visiting family just on holiday. She's at the Rafah crossing, can't get out. We heard the Americans yesterday saying that they were ultimately being held as hostages. Many of their families, and indeed Hamza Yousaf's in-laws, many of their families out marching and many of them living in this country and offended. And yet then we have the Home Secretary coming out saying that any protest in favour of Palestine was, in her view, a hate march. Now, that in itself, a divisive comment. And do you think that that is going to increase what we're seeing, this kind of people picking sides and then, you know, disagreeing with Starmer and Sunak and all of this?
Yes, certainly. There's a great deal of consternation on the streets of the major cities of the UK. And I think when the Home Secretary described these as hate marches, I don't think she was referring to any march at all in support of the Palestinian cause. But I think we have seen, in all of the major examples of these marches, chants for jihad across the West. We've seen calls, again, this very troubling slogan, "From the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free." All of these sorts of things, people covering their faces and waving flags of groups that may or may not be prescribed. All of these things we've definitely seen elements of hate at these marches. But yes, there have also been people marching very peacefully as well. And it does get all very muddled, I suppose, in all of this, which is why we've seen deep divisions within political parties. But one of the things that Rishi Sunak did when he visited the Middle East was, of course, visit President Sisi of Egypt. And Egypt, of course, controls that Rafah crossing. And one of the big points of British diplomacy is trying to get British dual citizens out across that crossing.
Yeah. Another just political big event that's happening today, the COVID inquiry, and the reason is for the star turn today will be former advisor to Number 10, Dominic Cummings. Could you give me in 20 seconds just what that means on this Halloween?
Many people said Dominic Cummings was the most powerful person in Downing Street when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. And that isn't even excluding Boris Johnson. Dominic Cummings often referred to Boris Johnson as the shopping trolley, careering from one aisle to the other, sort of not knowing his mind on issues. More lockdown, less lockdown, all the rest of it. And we have heard Dominic Cummings talk about this before. We've heard him speak in Parliament on similar issues. But we might well today see more hard evidence. We've already seen some WhatsApps that were released yesterday about what senior civil servants thought of decision-making or perhaps indecision-making over the course of the summer of 2020. We're no doubt going to hear more from that. No doubt fireworks from Dominic Cummings today. Not just Dominic Cummings, but also Lee Kane, a man who was very close to Dominic Cummings, seen as part of sort of the Vote Leave team in Downing Street when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. He was head of comms, and we're also going to hear from him this afternoon.
Incredible. I just wonder what Dominic Cummings does for a living now.
Does these eccentric blogs, doesn't he?
He's got what's known as a Substack blog where people subscribe to hear his views on things, but I do believe he is doing some advisory work as well.
For who?
Well, I think
government around the world. But it'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
I'm sure he's talking to very important people in many countries.
I think you may know more than you're letting on. Thank you very much indeed, Tom. Well, in the latest possible setback for government plans to move asylum seekers out of hotels and into cheaper accommodation, the High Court will today hear a cause from West Lindsey District Council that want to stop 2,000 migrants from being housed where?
At the former home of the dam busters. This is RAF Scampton. Now look, that all looks closed up and unused. I don't know, I don't live there, but this follows another legal challenge from Braintree District Council to block the Home Office plans to house the asylum seekers. So this is the former site of RAF Wethersfield. The question is, and we'll ask you to consider this, if it is not being used, if it is not even being used as a museum for the dam busters, why not house 2,000 migrants there? Here's Will Hollis.
The noise from the days of the RAF has disappeared, but this corner of Lincolnshire is far from quiet.
It is a bit loud. I'll switch it off now for you.
A base once used for protecting Britain, now Mandy says she doesn't feel safe living in Scampton. She's installed bigger fences and security cameras. And she's not alone. Rachel is worried too.
I go to bed at night, think about it. If I wake up in the night, I'll think about it.
It's the fear of the unknown, isn't it?
In a matter of months, their lives have changed. But they haven't given up yet.
We're going to the end of this road, where we're going to show our banners.
Home of 617 Squadron, the Dam Buster raids started right here.
They are sure to be remembered in all histories of the war. They did a magnificent job.
Now the Home Office is preparing Scampton for a new purpose.
The government will use military sites being disposed of in Essex and Lincolnshire and will collectively provide accommodation to several thousand asylum seekers.
The government says it will ease the need for hotels, which is costing £8 million a day.
The judicial review is essentially a test to see whether the Home Office can legally house asylum seekers at RAF Scampton and Wethersfield.
West Lindsey District Council says the Home Office is breaking the rules by housing migrants at air bases. Sally is the Director of Planning and Regeneration.
The government have committed to making these sites safe, legal and compliant, and until the Home Office can provide the evidence that that is the case, we will continue to challenge and seek assurance that that's what they're able to deliver on this site.
The government says it is meeting planning requirements. But charities have also opposed plans, with the Refugee Council describing air bases as unsuitable for migrants. The journey toward the judicial review has been bumpy. Mandy and Rachel say this has taken over their lives.
Everything I talk about is about this. No matter who I'm with, I talk about this.
The review could be the beginning of the end, or perhaps only the ending of the beginning. Will Hollis, GB News in Scampton.
Just to say, we'll be following that case at the High Court throughout the course of the day here on GB News. We'd love your views. What do you think should happen to RAF Scampton? Would you be in favour of this, or are you with the ladies there with their placards saying not on their watch? Let us know. GBnews.com.
Ever simple, is it?
No.
Some good news for anyone struggling with the cost of living. The British Retail Consortium has reported today that inflation has dropped to 5.2%. That's for October, a decrease from 6.2 in September. 6.2 in September, 5.2 in October. You're still paying more for goods, but not as much as you were
Well, the British Retail Consortium stated that food inflation dropped from 9.9% in September to 8.8% in October. That is the lowest rate since July 2022. Well, joining us now,
Mark Littlewood. Let's get a take from you, Mark. You're the Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs. Where would you put this on the scale of 1 to 10 for good news? I mean, as I say, it's not as if we're saving money, we're just not spending as much as expected, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. Good morning, Eamonn. I mean, it's not spectacularly good news, but you know what? Good economic news has been pretty thin on the ground for the last few years. So I'll cling on to any piece of moderately good economic news. And this is indeed such a piece. Inflation, slowly but surely, is moving down in the right direction. You're quite right, Eamonn, to point out that it still means prices are going up. It still means if you haven't had a 5.2% pay rise over the past year, you're poorer because prices have gone up 5.2%. But at last, we seem to be off peak inflation. Still way beyond the Bank of England's target. Their job is to try to keep inflation to 2%, not 5.2%, way over their target. But perhaps we're eventually moving towards that target at last. It's been a long time coming, at least the movement's in the right direction.
And food had been the one that was really hurting people. You know, you were just going in to get your basics and seeing every time you went in there the cost just escalating. Now it feels like that at the petrol pump. Personally, I sort of can't believe the prices, although I think in the last week or so they've started to come down again. But again, I don't know how much confidence I should have in that, because you look at everything that's happening in the Middle East and I can't help but wonder if that will have an impact on fuel and therefore inflation.
Yeah, that's right. You can never be certain. And I mean, 1 month of decent news moving in the right direction is not proof positive that we'll keep moving in the right direction. That's absolutely right. The position in Israel, obviously the ongoing war in Ukraine, all of these are challenges economically. But I think probably what are the tools we do have at our own disposal? The Prime Minister says it's one of his targets to halve inflation, but the truth is it's the Bank of England who actually hold the tools that mean we can get inflation down. That's to say, interest rates. They've obviously gone up a lot. So, Isabel, you might have noticed it at the petrol pump, but people with mortgages would definitely have noticed their mortgages going up recently. I wonder whether interest rates have probably now gone high enough. The Bank of England was slow in raising them, but they may have raised them high enough now to actually begin to get inflation down. So, although they took a long time to dial up interest rates, perhaps they should now take a pause before they put interest rates higher still.
Mark, just finally looking ahead to Christmas, you know, do we have much to look forward to there? We're hearing all about Gaza, that's going on there in terms of international conflict. Not a word about Ukraine these days. I mean, so that can pop its head up again. What would you like to say as we head towards Christmas?
Well, look, I mean, an outbreak of world peace would be a beautiful Christmas present, wouldn't it? But I'm not totally sure that's going to happen. I mean, at least it feels to me, at least here in the UK, one obviously feels for those out in the Middle East and in the Ukraine area, at least things aren't getting any worse. I guess that's not much of a Christmas present to look forward to, Eamonn. We're sort of flatlining, really, rather than improving. Perhaps we can look forward to next year being a little bit better than this one, although I admit that's a pretty low bar to clear.
Well, really appreciate your perspective, Mark. Thanks. Lovely hearing from you. Mark's the DG of the Institute of Economic Affairs. Thank you.
And the time is 7:22 and you're watching Breakfast on GBNews with Eamonn and Isabel. And here's a reminder of our top stories.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, saying it would amount to a surrender to Hamas and reiterating this is a time for war.
Boris Johnson's former advisor Dominic Cummings will give his potentially damning evidence to the COVID inquiry later. Cummings left his government post after being heavily criticised for travelling from London to Durham during lockdown in March 2020, whilst showing symptoms of the disease.
Battle over Dam Busters HQ, protests and a High Court case today over whether 2,000 migrants will be housed at RAF Scampton, home of the famous Dam Busters.
And should we be punished when our children misbehave? One restaurant added $50 to a couple's bill in America because of their badly behaved children. Let us know what you think. We'll be debating that in just a mo.
Nonsense.
Absolute nonsense.
Absolute nonsense.
Glad you agree.
I would have been for, if you can actually have the guts to say, excuse me, sir and madam, whatever it is, we don't want you in our restaurant. You and your horrible kids that are round the place like vermin, like mice, like rats running around the place. Get out. That will be fine. That would be good. But I don't think you can turn around and say, also, I'm going to charge you $50.
Yeah, but they'd never come back to the restaurant. Well, in fact, it doesn't sound like they'd go back to the restaurant. I just think everyone needs to be a bit nicer to kids.
Why?
Because you were a kid once.
I was a lovely child.
You didn't go to restaurants.
Did I ever show you pictures of me as a child?
Yes, you have a few times, yeah. You're very gorgeous.
So gorgeous.
Yes,
I was so lovely. So lovely.
What went
and I was
wrong?
so good. My grandmother told me, and I shouldn't let any of my brothers hear this, but my grandmother took me aside one day. She used to walk me in the park, and I was about 4 or 5.
You were her favourite?
Yeah. She said to me, has she been speaking to you through the spirits?
No, but that is awful.
No, it's not awful. She went and said, I love them all, Eamonn, but you are my favourite.
Yeah, but was she like Bruce Forsyth, who says that to all of the brothers? I suspect she was.
Well, I have to say, do you see all the many, many co-presenters I've had in my 43 years?
Yeah.
You're my favourite.
Ah, same. But I'm not quite that old.
But you've never had another co-presenter.
Yes, I have.
Who?
Stephen Dixon, Sam Washington. Yeah.
Okay.
You're my favourite, though.
Let's get an update now on your weather. We go to Alex for that.
Good morning. Whilst there's some fine weather across parts of Scotland, elsewhere it's going to be a changeable day this Tuesday. I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast. Heavy showery rain overnight continuing for a time across eastern parts of Northern Ireland. Could be some difficulties on the roads this morning, so do take care. Elsewhere, showery rain across many parts of England and Wales through the day, but some drier, brighter weather for a time before some wet and windy weather pushes in from the southwest later. Drier and brighter across parts of Scotland, but chilly here. Temperatures struggling, milder in the south with highs of around 14 or 15 Celsius. If you're going trick-or-treating this evening, there will be a band of rain pushing its way up from the southwest, but more northern areas staying drier for longer. But that wet and windy weather will sweep its way northwards across the bulk of the UK as we go through the early hours of Wednesday. For many, it will be a relatively mild night because of the wind and the rain, but a touch of frost possible in the far north of Scotland. That wind and rain then continues for many as we go through Wednesday. It could be heavy and persistent at times, particularly across northern areas, with then showery spells following in behind across the rest of the country, and some of these showers could be heavy with some rumbles of thunder mixed in too. Notice the beginnings of Storm Ciarán starting to push its way in from the southwest later on. Temperatures nothing really to write home about, especially because of the blustery, unsettled weather that many of us will have. Looking ahead then, yes, Storm Ciarán coming in, affecting southern parts to end the week, bringing some exceptionally strong winds.
What do you call that little thing above the A?
Father.
A father?
Yeah.
Hello, father. Like that. Forgive me, father, for I have sinned. One of those.
But you see, as soon as someone sees an accent, over, they think they have to go, like Macron. You know.
There's no accent over Macron.
Well, you put as if there is one over there.
Just a C and an R.
There's not a circumflex over that somewhere, are there? But, no, the name's Ciarán.
Ciarán. Ciarán, okay.
Ciarán.
Father. Forgive me, father.
Anyway, let's get me on the subject.
Oh, yeah.
What a puerile, stupid thing to do to name storms. It's stupid. What are we, all thick? There's a storm coming, there's another storm coming, and there's a storm the week after. It's winter.
Yeah, but it allows us to differentiate.
What?
Otherwise,
So
you say, do you remember that storm the week before last? Which one was that?
Remember that storm last October? Remember that? Why do I have to say
I
Storm
didn't tell you about
Miri?
Storm Babette last week. You know, my brother's a volunteer firefighter.
Yeah.
He got called out in the middle of the night for that, and his fire engine got stuck in the flood and had to be pulled out by a tractor in the Glen. They were really badly affected
But
in
he's
the
okay,
Glen.
is he?
He's fine, but
Oh,
the fire
terrible
engine couldn't
flooding,
get to anyone.
I saw on BBC Northern Ireland News last night, little sheep, loads of sheep in fields, and they
Swimming.
were what are you talking about? They were drowning.
I'm not laughing. It's just
you're so heartless.
Whoa! I'm not laughing at sheep drowning. That is dreadful.
You are like blue and Cruella de Vil.
So what did they do? Just leave them to drown? What kind of farmer would do that?
They sent
He should
in
have been a
people
good shepherd and
they sent in people like
helicoptered them
your
out.
brother. They
yeah,
had
volunteers.
And there is an actual big beast rescue arm off the fire brigade or whatever, and so they specifically, they're based in Newcastle and County Down, and then they flew to this area
quite right.
in helicopter.
Those are valuable commodities.
And they took all the sheepies out in a forklift.
Well, quite right. Yeah, it's the forklifts and the tractors that saved the day. I just couldn't believe the fire engine got stuck, but then, you know, maybe they're not. Anyway, we could talk about this all day. We've got to go.
But tell you what, no, we don't have to go. We don't have to go. Don't listen to them, Isabel. Why do you listen to all these people?
Okay.
No, here's the thing. Do you know all that row about sprogs in restaurants creating noise and hassle?
Not listening to their parents.
And not listening, and whether you should fine them. My children are impeccably behaved.
Were they? Mine aren't.
Impeccably behaved.
That's not true. They're getting better.
But anyway, should you fine the parents for their misbehaviour? We are going to talk about that next, OK? Don't go away.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK.
Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
There's a thing. We've lost a guest because they have a dirty camera. Why is that? It's a technical issue.
The way you were saying to the director, she's got a what? A dirty Sorry, I've got to stop with the Irish accent.
Could be a thumbprint or something on it.
She's got a dirty camera.
No, it doesn't mean there's dirtiness on the camera.
I wasn't suggesting it did. Anyway, our debate has become one-sided, but that's OK. We can play devil's advocate.
Julie Cook, right, let's go to Julie Cook. Julie is a parent and a journalist who's got in touch with us today about... Julie, you say that parents shouldn't be reprimanded if their child misbehaves in public. I'm thinking this could be the start of a whole new trend, though.
I think it's disgraceful, Eamonn. I think children are living beings and they have to behave as children. I think this Victorian culture we're having, which is children should be seen and not heard, is really, really disgraceful. I have 2 children. When they were little, my son was a nightmare, a tear away. There was nothing I could do to control him. People used to have a go at me, tell him to sit down. It doesn't work. It doesn't work with a 3-year-old boy. I've parented both my children the same. My daughter was an angel and would sit with a napkin on her lap. And my son would be running around.
Do you know what the trouble with you is? The trouble with you and the trouble with Isabel Webster is, you look, there's a clue in the title. Children, right? That's it. They are 3, 4, 5 years of age. They're not 27. They're not there to be negotiated with. They don't have the intelligence required. They just follow orders. And by you treating them as if they're adults, Julie, that's part of the whole problem.
Oh, you mean taking them out like human beings? I think, you know, what the trouble here is, Eamonn, I hate this. People say children shouldn't be in nice restaurants. Right, so we can only take them to, what, McDonald's and Burger King and Wimpy and places like that. Then we have parents and other non-parents saying children shouldn't be running around outside, not on iPads. But then when they run around outside and make noise, they're told off for that. And when you put them on the iPad, you're a bad mother.
Yes, and you do hear all the time children in French restaurants know how to behave, and that's because they get taken to French restaurants all the time and they get exposure to it. So you've got to take them out to practice so they know how to behave.
So they sit there, little know-it-alls going, President Macron.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Let's have a Macron cheesy
He's got an issue with the way I say Macron. Just forgive me for being able to speak French. However, I'm with you, Julie. I have a boy who's much calmer now, but as a 3-year-old, I would tear my hair out, be at the point of tears, and I could either stay at home pulling my hair out.
Who is the only person that can control your child? Right? Me, because I don't treat him like he's an adult. Do I?
You saw me.
I bribe him, I give him sweets.
Well, that's the problem.
I pass him money.
I try to parent him, and then we have disasters. But anyway, it's difficult being a parent. Parents are doing their best. Parents don't want to raise brats. Parents want their children to sit down at the table. And parents are aware that quite often they leave a mess under the table. If you're anything like me, I often try and clear a lot of it up before I leave Pizza Express with half the pizzas on the floor. But should you be penalising them? They're not going to go back to your restaurant ever again. They're going to tell all their friends, don't take your child to that restaurant. It's not good for business. What happened to the American thing? The customer is always right.
But the customer isn't always right. I told you that yesterday. Didn't I tell you about the man at the hotel, didn't I? Who was trying to book a room in cash.
You did, yeah.
I did, dirty beast.
Yeah. Anyway.
He was. Why would you want to book a room and only insist in paying cash for it to the receptionist behind?
Well, I have no idea. Maybe he didn't have a credit card with him.
So his wife wouldn't see the paper trail.
Is that what it was?
That's what I say.
Or depends who was with him.
Yeah, well,
Paul Coyte's children would never put a foot wrong.
Well, what do you think on this, Paul?
You know what? I've got to tell you, I'm more with you, because the thing is, I just think you've got to learn, you've got to teach them. You've got to teach the children how to go. It's one thing saying, oh, yeah, well, you know, we'll let them learn their own way, but you're there to guide them and show them and teach them. So if they learn ways from you, then they will more likely to be behaved.
That's worked, right? Your son knows how to behave in a restaurant now. It's just a rite of passage you've got to go through with boisterous little boys, perhaps.
Well, yeah, he does now, but he's 14, so he should do. The fact is, there's a difference between bad behaviour and a child running around. You can't make a 3-year-old walk politely to the loo, you know, and it's this Victorian attitude to children that they must be mini adults that I find, it just grates on me.
No, do you know what I find bliss, absolute bliss, Julie? When you go, when you're looking at a brochure for a hotel and it has the following 2 words, adults only. That's heaven.
Yeah, but it's mutual. Parents and children don't want to be around grumpy old people who are going to complain.
Who are these grumpy old people? I'm the most fun-filled, grumpiest person you'll know.
You're very lovely with children, I must say.
OK,
Anywho.
Julie, thank you very much indeed for your contribution, which we'll note but ignore. Thank you very much.
I'm with you, Julie. I'm with you all the way. Now, let's bring Paul Coyte back in.
So should we talk about children that never grow up, and that's footballers, professional footballers?
True.
Maybe that's where we should go?
They don't grow up.
Because a lot of the time,
like children all
because
the
the thing is, you get a young footballer will have everything done for them.
Everything.
And as they go through the line, they don't know how to do anything. They have chefs, they have their banks taking care of anything. They're driven everywhere, and then all of a sudden they retire and they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do.
And this is a serious point. We're not joking about here. No. This is serious. So they are infantile. Is that the word?
Infantilised?
Yeah,
no.
They are. They're treated as children. Yeah.
And it's those ones, and I always say that when it comes to professional footballers, also big stars, the ones that behave well, the ones that are very good and friendly and honest, and it's more commendable than it would be detestable for the ones that behave badly, because the thing is so many have not been actually shown the way to behave.
They've not been weaned.
They've not been weaned. As I say, bringing up the children, teaching them. I'm sure I'm going to go into a Crosby, Stills and Nash song in a minute. Okay. But should we talk about the Ballon d'Or?
Oh, yes, let's talk about that, because that was like the Oscars
It is the Oscars, and the thing is, they did it last night in Paris, and yet they always try and make it sort of exciting, and they started off with the 2 awards awards on the Eiffel Tower, and then they keep cutting back to these 2 awards, then on a boat on the Seine, on its way. It's very bizarre. I couldn't really understand why, but there we are. That is the Theatre du Châtelet, and there is someone who is a very impressive young man. That's Jude Bellingham. Now, he's only 20 years old, and when I talk about footballers that don't seem to grow up and don't know how to behave, this guy is unbelievable, and he's going to be a huge star. Well, he is already, and a future Ballon d'Or winner. That's Vinicius Junior. He wins the bet. What do you think of the jacket?
Well, Vinicius, very good, but Vinicius got a lot of racial abuse, didn't he, earlier this year? And now he's taken that as a strength, and he's doing. Well, that's King. What's his name?
Yes,
Prince Albert
of Monaco.
Yeah.
Did his speech in French, obviously. Also, Manchester City there. They won the Best Team Award. I think it's the 3rd year running that they won that. And all the players there, all nominated for the Ballon d'Or as well. The Women's Award, that's Aitana Bonmati from Spain.
World Cup winner?
Yes, World Cup winner. And, of course, Luis Rubiales. And he's been banned for 3 years, so she's probably got a smile on her face because of that as well. It's a double win for her. There she is getting her Ballon d'Or. And then the main men's Ballon d'Or. There's her mum and dad, look very proud, of course. And the main Ballon d'Or winner, there he is again for the 8th time. He's got everybody standing to applaud. I think everybody probably realises that this is the last one he's going to win because he's playing in Miami now. And there's Lionel Messi.
You know who'll win it next year? Jude Bellingham.
Jude Bellingham or Erling Haaland. Or, well, maybe James Maddison or Heung-min Son.
No.
OK, fine.
But
we'll see how we go.
But, well, do you know, actually, we're talking about Jude Bellingham there. Do you know whose birthday it is today? Marcus Rashford. Do you know how old he is?
26.
Correct.
26. 26. He needs to smile on his face.
Net,
We've got time for a bit of Andy Murray. Quick bit of Andy Murray.
He's been throwing his toys out the pram.
He really has. He was playing in Paris, so he's in Paris as well. Let's have a look at the Paris Masters, and he got beaten by Alex de Minaur. He was 7th. There we are. He lost 7-5 in the final set. He had 2 match points. Very unhappy. Look at that. Very unhappy. And he says he's just not enjoying tennis at the moment. Look at the state of that.
Would you love to have that framed in your house?
You know what? I would love that. And then you say, there it is. The broken one more than the actual, the one that actually played with.
I used to sit behind Sir Alex Ferguson. And Alex loved a bit of chewing gum, you know, so he'd love you.
Yeah. That's right, yeah.
Chew away, whatever it is. And he would spit it out.
I don't like where this is going.
Yeah, well, you see, at half-time, they were like rats deserting a sinking ship. They would pick it up, every bit of chewing gum, every bit of chewing gum. I mean, I got a couple of pieces myself.
Good grief.
Do you want to come and see?
No, but you could take some of my chewing gum next time you do one of your audience with. Maybe that would keep some of the crowds happy.
Well, I don't know what would keep them happy. It was those women, they just came on that stage and they ripped clothes off me in every direction.
You know what's strange, Isabel, is that if you go under the desk there, 5 pieces of chewing gum under the desk. Is that where it goes?
It's just like my tights.
The
inbox is absolutely on fire, following on from that debate about kids in restaurants. We haven't got time to read them all now.
Well, wait a minute.
We will.
I bet you, I haven't even looked, I bet you they're agreeing with me.
There's a mixture. There's a mixture, I would say. Some of us have called us woke. Well, me woke. I don't know. Can't remember what your view was. Did you agree with me?
No.
Oh. You started off agreeing with me.
So what you're saying, there's a mixture, 95% in favour of me.
Isabel and Eamonn are quite humorous this morning. Thanks, Stephen A. Warden.
Well, you see, this is the whole point. I mean, think of how boring you used to be before I came along. But no, but seriously, you had a problem with personality and people would...
so rude.
But, darling, I looked at you and I said, look, I will take you out of this.
I'm naturally
old before your
earnest.
time. You're an earnest person. And
you're just a loose cannon. Anyway, we have to go to the break before everyone has a freak out at the gallery. Bye, Paul.
I'm going. I'm just walking out. That's it.
Happy Halloween. Stay with us. We're talking about Halloween tonight. There'll be lots of people in fancy dress knocking on your door. But when does a costume cross the line to get you into trouble? We'll discuss that next.
Are you dressing up tonight?
I probably will, yeah.
What will you dress
I don't know which. The nose is staying on, don't worry.
Keep that. Back after this.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new
It's
teeth.
your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tell you we are on royal alert as the King and Queen get ready to touch down in Kenya, right across that one. But here to go through some of the day's headlines, Deputy Political Editor for the Mail on Sunday, Anna Mikhailova, and political commentator Alex Armstrong. But also we've got Royal Correspondent Cameron Walker. These are live pictures now from Kenya. Cameron.
Good morning. Yes, the King and Queen, they're arriving in Nairobi for a ceremonial welcome received by the President and First Lady of Kenya, President Ruto, of course. They're proceeding along a red carpet there, greeting the Chief of the Kenyan Defence Forces and commanders of the Army, Air Force and Navy. Now, the King is going to join President Ruto shortly on the dais for a guard of honour who are going to be conducting a royal salute. The Kenyan Defence Forces will be playing both national anthems, and there's also going to be a 21-gun salute. So pomp and pageantry in action here. The King's first state visits to a Commonwealth realm as monarch.
And that's significant, isn't it? He'll have been involved in choosing which country he goes to first, and the royals have a big connection with this East African nation.
They certainly do. I mean, it's very poignant for His Majesty because it was where the Queen Elizabeth II, became Queen in 1952. She went up to the Treetop Safari Lodge as a princess. The following morning, she came down as Queen. Now, the King is not going to be visiting the famous treetops. Oh, odd camera.
They've gone inside. The camera's just repositioning there.
Yes. Well, the King's not going to be visiting treetops. It's too far away from Nairobi. The problem is, as well, that the original building was destroyed in the 1950s, a couple of years after the Queen arrived, in the Mau Mau uprising, which which is another sticking point for this trip. Now, the King is expected to acknowledge that uprising where Kenyans were essentially trying to dispute the British rule of the country. In response, it's estimated around 90,000 Kenyans were either executed or tortured or maimed by the British rulers. That's according to the Kenyan Human Rights Watch.
Well, let's just have a listen into the national anthem as it's being played in the Kenyan capital this morning in front of His Majesty the King.
And we'll cross back to Kenya if anything else develops there. Thank you very much indeed, Cameron. Anna Mikalova, we've got the Maddie McCann story front page of The Sun today. Cops finally say sorry to Kate and Jerry. This is the Portuguese police. The Sun reporting that big time on the front page. Mark Williams-Thomas, the investigator on this very channel last night, disputes that.
Yes, indeed. So the story is based on a panorama film broadcast last night that said that Portuguese police have actually travelled to the UK to meet the McCanns and apologise to them for the way they bungled the investigation, the way they made them suspects so early on. And this has obviously made the papers. But Mark Williams-Thomas, as you say, who is a very senior investigative journalist, says his sources are saying the opposite, that they did travel but didn't apologise.
Let's hear what he had to say exactly on GB News.
I can tell you, having spoken to my contact in the Portuguese PJs, that they did have a meeting with the McCann family. It was a commission that went over there. Their understanding is very clearly that they did not apologise in relation to the case. What they did very clearly say to them is there's no longer a Portuguese investigation. This matter is now being investigated by the Germans and very much put the responsibility over to them. So when the BBC is saying that there is very clear understanding that they apologise, that is certainly not the message that the PJ are telling me.
What is the truth? Goodness me.
Well, I mean, as I say, Mark Williams-Thomas has a very good track record, and usually has impeccable sources. So it's an interesting one. I don't think it's the first time the police has and we've seen this with the Met, have met with families of victims and said that, well, given one account of the meeting, and then actually emerges that something completely different was said. So we shall see off the back of this. I'm curious to see what the response is.
There's more we could read into this, but we may return to this one later. Alex, you've got a defence story here.
Yeah, this is inside The Sun, Alex, about the Germans to cost the UK 6,000 fighter jet jobs. It's a bit of a defence upset. Tell us what's happened here. It's all about Saudi Arabia.
It's pretty serious, actually. It's pretty serious. Up to, 6,000 jobs being possibly cut. BAE Systems, which is a pretty prestigious company here in the UK. So what's happened is the Green part of the coalition government in Berlin, the Green Party, is blocking selling arms to Saudi Arabia over fears they're going to use it to bomb Yemen. Now, the big thing about this is that we've built these jets, right? So they're ready to go. So we've just got a few parts of the production line left to go. And it's likely that this is going to go to France. So another government messed up here on a potentially big win on Brexit, and they still haven't been able to nail this.
Explain why it's a government mess up. If it's the Green Party in Europe blocking this, why is that a British government problem?
It's a diplomatic issue, right? So we should be putting a ton of pressure on Germany when we've already invested billions of British pounds and time and energy into this to get this over the line. There's also contractual issues here as well. So this is what should be a business deal being confuddled by politicians across Europe.
And just explain why the French would inherit finishing the job. What would happen to these fighter jets after that? Would they then sell them to Saudi Arabia?
That's exactly it. They'll be the ones to sell them and make all the profit, and will be the ones that lose out. So much so that BAE might just close entirely.
Seriously?
Yeah, in the UK.
And you're talking about thousands of job losses?
Yeah, it's just 6,000 to start, but that will be a knock-on effect as confidence in our ability to deliver these weapons will just be completely diminished.
And Alex, Anna, will this be seen by some as related to Brexit in any way?
Well, it all depends on how they respond from now on. I think that if the government says, actually, hold on, we're going to fight for this, we're not going to we're going to ignore the Germans, then that'll actually be a win for Brexit, because being in the EU may have made that harder.
Okay.
Anna, Stormzy, the rap artist, the singer, he has made a tweet, and it ties in with this COVID inquiry. We've got 2 minutes to tell us about that.
So Stormzy is weighing into politics again. He's watching the COVID inquiry and he's saying that more doctors and nurses died during COVID than soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan. Therefore, we've got all these poppies for Remembrance Day now. Where is the Remembrance Day poppy for COVID doctors and nurses? What's an interesting point? Well, we can have a poppy for COVID doctors and nurses.
You look at what goes on in Parliament now, and they almost have something on their lapel for every different occasion.
That's true, but probably doctors and nurses in COVID are more deserving, in my mind, than some of the causes, perhaps, that we've got.
I think the poppy also is meant to be to remind us of the tragedy of what happened to cause those wars in the first place. We're talking about a lot about Israel and Palestine now, and anti-Semitism. There's a lot of ideology attached to why we remember the war. Of course, it's important for us to remember what happened during COVID, but I think there's a deep significance as to why we remember.
Keeping our liberty, ultimately.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, I'd love to know what people's views are of that at home. And interesting, Stormzy's saying he's sitting at home and watching the COVID inquiry. I wonder how many people are also doing that. It certainly has been quite box office, hasn't it, Anna? We're expecting a bit more popcorn watching today.
Absolutely. Dominic Cummings up at the stand.
You're talking about Stormzy, but what I'm reading in The Sun here is Stormzy blows up, rants at tearful Maya as part of a blazing row in an LA street. And
well, if she needs a shoulder to cry on...
I could be here for her.
Yeah.
Maya and Stormzy in huge bust-up. Maya, I'm here, just... shoulder to cry on. That's all it has to be.
We'll have more from Alex and from Anna a little bit later on, but for now, we say goodbye. See you in a moment.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GBNews.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good morning. It is coming up to 8 o'clock on Tuesday, the 31st of October. This is Breakfast with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
And I'm just having my breakfast.
A little pause there. Well, I'll start, shall I? Here's what's leading our news this morning. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, saying it would amount to a surrender to Hamas and reiterating this is a time for war. Mark White has the latest from Tel Aviv.
Well, amid tensions in the wider region, US sources have confirmed that an air base in western Iraq has come under attack from two armed drones in the early hours this morning. There are no reports of any casualties.
Thank goodness for that, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. In Britain, divisions are flaring over the war. The Prime Minister sacked MP Paul Bristow from a government position for defying the PM by calling for a complete ceasefire.
It's a big day in the COVID inquiry as well. Boris Johnson's former advisor, Dominic Cummings, will give his potentially damning evidence about how the government handled the hugely controversial pandemic.
Battle over the Dam Busters HQ, protests and a High Court case today over whether 2,000 migrants will be housed at RAF Scampton, home of the famous Dam Buster pilots.
And the King and Queen are starting their 4-day state visit to Kenya. These shots are from just a few moments ago, and it is the pair's first visit to a Commonwealth country since the coronation, and it is where the late Queen's reign began in February 1952.
The current Queen, I think I caught a glimpse of her in a white coat.
Yes.
Very nice.
Lovely, very elegant.
Looked really, really good. Alex Burkhill with the far from elegant weather.
Storm Kieran's arriving later tomorrow, but before then we have some wet and windy weather around today as well. I'll have more later.
And you've almost broken our email system with all your comments on children in restaurants. We'll try and reflect those a little bit later on this hour, but keep them coming in, gbviews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
One of the things that we're talking about today is Britain becoming more divided over Israel's war on Hamas. The Prime Minister's message is that the country stands united with Israel.
But there are increasing numbers turning out for pro-Palestinian protests, stretching police resources, while Rebel Conservative and Labour MPs are demanding a ceasefire.
Now, that has cost that MP there his job. He is called Paul Bristow, and his comments demanding a full ceasefire were not consistent with the principles of collective responsibility, said the PM.
Well, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, saying it would amount to a surrender to Hamas, and cited the Bible, saying this is a time for war.
Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th. Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism, to surrender to barbarism. That will not happen.
The United Nations charity UNICEF says 420 children are being injured or killed in Gaza every day because of bombing.
Well, our security editor, Mark White, is in Tel Aviv for us this morning with news of more bombing where you are. Tell us more, Mark.
Well, indeed. The latest is actually from US sources about drone attacks on US forces in western Iraq. Now, US forces in Iraq and Syria have come under about 25 separate attacks since this conflict began on the 7th of October. And in fact, last week, US missile strikes targeted 2 positions in Syria, which, according to the US, were linked to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, who the US claims were facilitating Iranian proxies in their targeting of US positions around Iraq and Syria. The US says it will not hesitate to strike back at anyone who tries to harm US forces in the region. Now, we understand that this latest attack involved 2 armed drones. There are no reports at this stage of any casualties, but a further escalation adding to the tensions throughout this region. And it's not just in Iraq or Syria, of course, right here in Israel with what is going on in Gaza. The Israeli forces are also guarding their northern border and their southern border. There was a drone alert about an hour and a half or so ago for Eilat, right in the south at Red Sea Resort, with a drone intrusion there. Reports from the local area said that that drone was shot down. And in the north, we've had rocket attacks, missile attacks, anti-tank missile attacks over that border with southern Lebanon into northern Israel. Attacks that have been carried out by Hezbollah, that Iranian proxy, and associated groups who are now operating in southern Lebanon, who have upped the ante in terms of the attacks in recent days, with Israel warning that if Hezbollah and other groups in Lebanon decide to come into this war in a significant way, then there will be very significant repercussions.
Mark, just a word about the hostages. Israel managed to rescue one of their female soldiers. At the same time, Hamas releasing a video of 3 further hostages looking very harrowed and distressed.
Yes, this was Corporal Ori Megafate, who was rescued by an Israeli ground force team yesterday. They had intelligence. It was a pre-planned operation. They went in and rescued this corporal. No more details about where she was being held, whether it was above ground or below ground, but it was in northern Gaza. She has now been reunited with her family and was in remarkably good health. And this has been praised by the Israeli Prime Minister and other politicians here as an indication that, you know, however difficult it is, the freeing of the hostages is a top priority for those ground forces going into Gaza. They will do their very best to try to free as many of the hostages as they can. And it came, as you said, Isabel, on the back of that very harrowing video released of 3 other hostages, part of Hamas's propaganda war, where 3 people were filmed on video. We've chosen not to show those images, but one of the women was quite critical of the Israeli Prime Minister, suggesting that there should be a ceasefire. But of course, she is talking under extreme duress, and that has to be taken into consideration with everything that these hostages are saying.
Mark, thank you very much indeed.
We're now going to talk about the latest setback for government plans to move asylum seekers out of hotels and into accommodation, which will cost much less.
Well, the High Court is about to hear a case from West Lindsey District Council. They want to stop 2,000 migrants being housed at the former home of the dam busters, RAF Scampton.
Now, this follows another legal challenge from Braintree District Council. They want to block Home Office plans to house asylum seekers at the former site of RAF Wethersfield.
Well, our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has more.
The noise from the days of the RAF has disappeared, but this corner of Lincolnshire is far from quiet.
It is a bit loud. I'll switch it off now for you.
A base once used for protecting Britain, now Mandy says she doesn't feel safe living in Scampton. She's installed bigger fences and security cameras. And she's not alone. Rachel is worried too.
I go to bed at night, think about it. If I wake up in the night, I'll think about it.
It's the fear of the unknown, isn't it?
In a matter of months, their lives have changed. But they haven't given up yet.
We're going to the end of this road where we're going to show our banners.
Home of 617 Squadron, the Dam Buster raids started right here.
They are sure to be remembered in all histories of the war. They did a magnificent job.
Now the Home Office is preparing Scampton for a new purpose.
The government will use military sites being disposed of in Essex and Lincolnshire and will collectively provide accommodation to several thousand asylum seekers.
The government says it will ease the need for hotels, which is costing £8 million a day. The judicial review is essentially a test to see whether the Home Office can legally house asylum seekers at RAF Scampton and Wethersfield. West Lindsey District Council says the Home Office is breaking the rules by housing migrants at airbases. Sally is the Director of Planning and Regeneration.
The government have committed to making these sites safe, legal and compliant, and until the Home Office can provide the evidence that that is the case, we will continue to challenge and seek assurance that that's what they're able to deliver on this site.
The government says it is meeting planning requirements, but charities have also opposed plans, with the Refugee Council describing airbases as unsuitable for migrants. The journey toward the judicial review has been bumpy. Mandy and Rachel say this has taken over their lives.
Everything I talk about is about this. No matter who I'm with, I talk about this.
The review could be the beginning of the end, or perhaps only the ending of the beginning. Will Hollis, GB News in Scampton.
Well, we can go to Ray Addison, who joins us from the Court of Appeal now. Good morning to you, Ray. All eyes on what the decision will be where you are later on.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two hearings taking place today here at the Royal Courts of Justice at the Planning Court. Now, of course, we've been hearing some of the details there. The first is RAF Scampton in Lincolnshire. Now, that, of course, was formerly home to the 617 Squadron, famously the Dam Busters in the Second World War. And they're going to hear an injunction from West Lindsey District Council against plans to house up to 2,000 migrants there. And the initial plan from the Home Office was to have that number housed there by December. The local council is claiming that the Home Office doesn't have the necessary planning permission. They're questioning the use of that wartime Class Q emergency rule to bypass the planning laws. Now, earlier on, they did an inspection of that site, and they actually issued an enforcement notice to the Home Office barring them from carrying out any further work. They said that from that inspection it was actually clear that the site was intended to be used to house migrants for more than the 12 months which had initially been stated, and therefore they hadn't done the necessary environmental and other impact assessments that they should have done for that requirement. Over in Essex, of course, we've got Wethersfield Airfield. That's Braintree District Council. They're bringing the challenge. It's being heard in the same court by the same judge. They're planning to house 1,700, and they've been quite specific, single adult male asylum seekers at that site. Even the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, has said the site is not suitable. It's too remote. And again, they're saying that the use of that Class Q wartime planning emergency ruling is just, it's actually not an emergency, they're saying, and so that's not appropriate. We knew that as of September 1st, there was 94 asylum seekers housed there. We're unsure at the moment of the exact numbers, but we do know that the site has been fitted out, or is in the process of being fitted out. There's going to be a GP surgery, obviously accommodation, dining hall, multi-faith centre, and that when the migrants go there, they will receive a welcome pack and go through orientation. So 2 cases being heard here today at the Royal Courts.
Thank you very much indeed. I want to go back to Will Hollis, who's at RAF Scampton there, because well, we're just eager to know. We saw the 2 ladies and their worries and their fears and their protests at what's going on. What is the feeling that you're picking up?
Yes, well, it's been 7 months since it was announced that RAF Scampton would be one of those bases, one of the answers to the migrant question that is puzzling
the government so much right now. The feeling is strong, to use a simple word. You'll notice here from the very front gates of RAF Scampton along the A15, which is very noisy in the background, you'll notice the flags that are here and the tents and the tarpaulin. That's because people have set up here because they want their protest to be around the clock, 24 hours, and this has been growing over the last 7 months. There are actually a number of encampments along the A15 at different gates, and just as Ray Addison was saying, there was a stop notice, an enforcement notice from the local council, which was to essentially stop the Home Office from working, and that's what some of these camps are doing. They're monitoring the Home Office work. So just because of that reaction to the Home Office carrying on the work shows how seriously people are taking this, because they think that it's not just West Lindsey District Council's responsibility to try and fight this. The local people of Scampton Camp, which is the former married living quarters, they're taking this incredibly seriously as well. So much so that it's pretty cold right now, below -10 degrees, that people are choosing to sleep outside in tents as if it was some sort of a music festival, roughing it, to try and monitor what's going on and make sure that their voices are heard. It's not just people from Scampton Camp, though, the people that live within a mile of the front gates, and will ultimately be the people that are most affected by 2,000 asylum seekers moving in here. But it's people from around the country. I've heard stories of people coming from fairly close places like Doncaster and other parts of Yorkshire, even Birmingham in the West Midlands, or sometimes even people from the south. We talked a little bit about those two ladies, Rachel and Mandy, who've been protesting here throughout the last 7 months, and that's just two of the voices of the very many people who are concerned about what their future might be in this very small part of Lincolnshire, which has become a big part of the migrant story.
Well, just explain to us, we saw a vehicle go in through those gates behind you when you were just beginning to speak to us then. If this injunction is successful, if the people waving flags behind you get their way today, and RAF Scampton isn't turned over to the government's wishes of making it a home for asylum seekers, what will become of it? What will it be used for?
Yes, well, one of the biggest contestations against this asylum centre is that West Lindsey District Council has a plan for £300 million worth of regeneration investment through a company called Scampton Holdings Limited. As we've said, the Dam Busters history here is invaluable to the local people as well as to the local economy. So that is the plan, turn this place into a heritage centre, but not just that, also a centre for aerospace in investigation. One of the things that one of the local councillors said to me is that they plan to shoot satellites up from this part of Lincolnshire because, of course, if they can fly planes in and out of it, why not shoot satellites up into the sky? So there is a plan. It's one of the reasons why West Lindsey District Council has been so fervent in their protestation against this. You would have seen people coming in. Of course, people are coming in to start their day at work. You will have noticed security guards in there unlocking the gates and then locking them again. There are people coming in and out of here all the time, despite that stop notice, which is a legal enforcement notice, because West Lindsey District Council think that the planning restrictions are being broken. But what might happen if the injunction, if the judicial review goes in the favour of West Lindsey District Council, we simply don't know, because as we know, after court cases you can sometimes have appeals, but the people here that have been sleeping outside of RAF Scampton, sometimes for months on end, they say that if this does go towards being an asylum centre, that they are going to stay here no matter what.
Well, thanks very much indeed.
I'm going to tell you something boring now.
Oh, great. Can't
At
wait.
the start of the Dam Busters film,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you've watched over and over and over again, there is a tracking shot, a shot that's on the, I think it's on the back of a van or something, and it just goes through, and there's all this action with guys playing cards and kicking ball and walking their dog or whatever it is, and it goes through them all, and then they get on a van and they drive out to the airplanes when the siren goes off. It's the most amazing bit of cinematography.
I love an amazing. No, because it makes me want to watch it, and I do appreciate decent cinematography.
Good.
So I shall check it out.
The royal visit, which is in Kenya, the King and Queen have arrived there. The East African nation is playing host to them 60 years after Britain parted ways with them.
Well, Cameron Walker has this report into their visit.
Nairobi, Kenya's capital, was in sunny mood for the visit of Princess Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh.
Britain and Kenya have historical ties, but the world is changing. America, Russia and China all reportedly want more influence in the African region, once part of the British Empire. Perhaps unsurprisingly, trade, culture and King Charles's favourite, sustainability, are high on the agenda for this week's state visit. The King and Queen have been invited by President Ruto as Kenya prepares to celebrate 60 years of independence from Britain. A convenient excuse for the Foreign Office to turn on the Royal Charm offensive to strengthen ties with its strategic ally. Professor Chris Imafidon was invited to Buckingham Palace last week for a reception celebrating Kenyan diaspora in the UK.
The people came together to realise that not only does the destiny of the UK lies with the Kenyan youth that will provide the energy, the enthusiasm and their love for digital world, but this is more important, the safari has to be preserved for the next generation. And the king is always going on about this ecological preservation.
It was at Kenya's Treetop Safari Lodge in 1952 when King Charles's mother arrived as a princess and departed as queen. But the 1950s had a darker side too. The Mau Mau uprising opposed British rule and white farmers were targeted in violent attacks. In response, an estimated 90,000 Kenyans were executed, tortured or injured by British rulers, according to the Kenyan Human Rights Commission. Campaigners want the king to publicly apologise.
After the apologies, we also expect a reparation.
But a decade ago, the British government did pay out nearly £20 million to Kenyans for human rights abuses. And the king is expected to acknowledge what's been described by his deputy private secretary as the more painful aspects of the UK and Kenya's shared history. But there are fears this could open a can of worms.
Apologies are not appropriate at this point in time, and I think the King is fully aware of that. He, of course, has expressed regrets in the past in Barbados and in Canada for Britain's colonial past, and I see no problem with him continuing to do that. But apologies are a different issue because they do open the doors for reparations.
Palace and government aides will be determined not to have a repeat of Prince William and Princess Catherine's trip to the Caribbean, which was partly overshadowed with calls for reparations and a formal apology for historical slavery. Their focus is on King Charles's visits to a Commonwealth country, his first as monarch and as head of a family of nations. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Let's get the latest now from Cameron, who joins us in the studio. And Cameron, clearly the royals have this warm affinity with Kenya. Do the Kenyans feel the same way, or do you think there will be some people who will be asking for some sort of apology for our colonial past?
It's been a bit of a mixed bag, I think, to be honest. There are certainly groups over the last couple of weeks who have been very vocal in the fact that they want a formal apology from King Charles, but also reparations from the British government. Now, the British government did pay out nearly £20 million, as you heard in my report there, in 2013 to 5,000 elderly residents of Kenya. William Hague, Foreign Secretary at the time, said he sincerely regrets the actions of the colonial government back then, but he stopped short of a formal, full apology. The reason being is that the modern-day government, the British government's view is that a modern-day government should not have to apologise or be legally liable for the actions of the colonial government 50-odd years ago. And that, I suspect, is the stance the King is going to take this time. He's going to nod to the Mau Mau uprising, the atrocities committed by the colonial British rulers at the time. But I don't think we're going to see a full apology from the King because, as Rafe Hadel-Manku said in that report, it can kind of open a can of worms when it comes to more reparations.
And in terms of our links with Kenya, I mean, it's 60 years since independence, but the British Army still train there. Lots of our British doctors go over to train with the Army over there. Lots of links still with the country. And, of course, the royals themselves having a history of connection with it as well.
They certainly do. It's where Queen Elizabeth II became Queen in 1952 at the Treetop Safari Lodge. The King, you mentioned military stuff there. The King and Queen are going to be watching a mock beach landing undertaken by the Kenyan Marines and the British Marines who train together in the region. It's the King's first visits to a Commonwealth nation, a family of nations. Trade is going to be high on the agenda, but as well as that, Kenyan young people as well. I was speaking to Chris Imafidon, who was at the Kenyan reception at Buckingham Palace last week. He does lots of work with young people in particular, and he was speaking about Britain's ageing population and the fact that there's no young people with the skill set needed to fill the workforce in 20 years' time. So the British government's Foreign Office looking to Commonwealth countries, young people, to see if they can fill that gap.
Interesting. OK, Cameron, with that, thank you very much.
So, with the King and Queen in Kenya, we will be debating whether the King should apologise during his visit for Britain's involvement in colonialisation. That's after your weather.
Good morning. Whilst there's some fine weather across parts of Scotland, elsewhere it's going to be a changeable day this Tuesday. I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast. Heavy showery rain overnight continuing for a time across eastern parts of Northern Ireland. Could be some difficulties on the roads this morning, so do take care. Elsewhere, showery rain across many parts of England and Wales through the day, but some drier, brighter weather for a time before some wet and windy weather pushes in from the southwest later. Drier and brighter across parts of Scotland, but chilly here. Temperatures struggling, milder in the south with highs of around 14 or 15 Celsius. If you're going trick-or-treating this evening, there will be a band of rain pushing its way up from the southwest, but more northern areas staying drier for longer. But that wet and windy weather will sweep its way northwards across the bulk of the UK as we go through the early hours of Wednesday. For many, it will be a relatively mild night because of the wind and the rain, but a touch of frost possible in the far north of Scotland. That wind and rain then continues for many as we go through Wednesday. It could be heavy and persistent at times, particularly across northern areas, with then showery spells following in behind across the rest of the country, and some of these showers could be heavy with some rumbles of thunder mixed in too. Notice the beginnings of Storm Ciarán starting to push its way in from the southwest later on. Temperatures nothing really to write home about, especially because of the blustery, unsettled weather that many of us will have. Looking ahead then, yes, Storm Ciarán coming in, affecting southern parts to end the week, bringing some exceptionally strong winds.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So here we are. It is Halloween today, and a lot of you will be trick-or-treating, opening the doors to those lovely little children outside, saying, trick-or-treat, and here's a sweetie for you, and whatever. You're lucky you live in the wilderness.
No, I'm having to go to my parents' road to trick-or-treat.
To make sure the kids get some of that going on.
Yeah.
Right, OK. Well, you know, but your William is an addict to sweets.
Yes,
He is.
I know.
That's a short distance for him to go. So we've got a Halloween story for you.
Yes, we are asking, have you ever thought about where you'd be best to be placed if there were a zombie apocalypse? I have to confess, I've never thought about it.
Oh, I go to bed every night and I go and I'm there and I think...
Yeah, so where do you think?
When
Belfast?
I wake up, where would I be best placed if there was a zombie apocalypse?
Northern Ireland?
Well, they wouldn't dare.
Well, then that's the
do it
best
in
way.
Belfast,
Sorted.
would they? That'd be the... we'd win that one.
Let's see if Rant Casino agree. They've revealed the 10 worst places to live in the UK. Were the dead to come back to life? GB News North West reporter Sophie Reaper has all the details.
There's always been a global fascination with the undead. They're on our televisions. Hey! They're in our films.
Go for the head.
And now, thanks to Halloween experiences like this one, they're even being brought into our everyday reality.
What do you think you're doing?
We want to experience something different because we want to get away from our humdrum life. Here we try to create a raw experience, but it's in a safe environment. So although they're getting scared, it's enjoyable. It helps them to get away from their problems that they've got in their life and just move into a different world.
Up and down the UK at places like this, people are paying to feel the fear of being chased by actors who simply look or behave like the undead. But what if there was a real zombie apocalypse? New research from Rant Casino has found the 10 worst places to live if the dead came back to life. 4 were in the northwest, 2 were in London. But with 149 cemeteries and over 800,000 potential zombies, the worst place to find yourself would be Leeds. If there were ever to be a real-life zombie apocalypse, Leeds is supposed to be the worst place to live. Would you survive, and if so, how?
Yes, I definitely would survive. Lived in Leeds a lot of years, and I know what a lot of people who live in Leeds are like, and I'm surprised they're even alive. So as a zombie, I think I'd be safe.
Yeah, I would survive because I don't believe it'd ever happen.
No, not really. No.
Can I ask why?
Because I couldn't run fast anyway and I wouldn't know where to go to.
Yeah, because I'd just run away because they're really slow.
I would certainly survive because I would just frighten them.
Well, whatever a person's survival tactics might be, being unprepared for a zombie apocalypse this Halloween could perhaps be a grave mistake. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Now, it's fascinating how all these things are just reworkings of old Christian beliefs and whatever, because they talk about, the dead awakening and all that sort of thing. But that is what All Souls Night is. So there's All Saints Day, which I think is on Wednesday. I think that's the 1st of November.
That's tomorrow, yeah.
And you go to Mass on All Souls Day.
Halloween
All Saints
is
Day,
the
eve of All Hallows. And then All Souls Day is when the dead awake and they come back to where they used to live, and you have to leave a libation, a drink for them, and some food as well. And the dead come back and visit your house as well on Thursday night.
Wonderful.
2nd of November. They definitely visit your house because yours is a haunted house. But it is how it is.
I'm sure people have died in my house, yeah.
I'm sure.
Lots.
And I'm sure they'll all come back. There'll be a knocking on the door. Don't open the door if you hear knocking on Thursday night.
Oh, my goodness me.
Who's the scariest thing you'll ever see? A Disney film called Darby O'Gill and the Little People. And it stars Sean Connery. And there's a scene with a banshee. And
Oh, yeah, a wailing banshee.
And if a banshee comes knocking at your door, you've had it.
Is that the Grim Reaper?
Yeah, the banshee comes there and they're saying, "Come with me." Ooh. See, and they take away the dead bodies.
Yeah.
So when someone's soul leaves their body, it's because the banshee's outside weeping and wailing.
Did you notice that our reporter into all of that was Sophie Reaper?
That's why they call her Grim around here.
That's why they assigned this job to her, that's for sure. We're going to have a little look now at people's thoughts, returning now away from the Day of the Dead and all of that to the royal state visit to Kenya. And after the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge's controversial visit to the Caribbean in 2022, where Britain's historical links to slavery took centre stage, eyebrows are being raised as King Charles travels to Kenya today to start his first visit to a Commonwealth country as Britain's monarch.
So Buckingham Palace has confirmed he will touch on the painful aspects of Britain's relationship with Kenya, but will not apologise directly for a colonial history, Britain's colonial history.
So is Charles wrong for not apologising to the people of Kenya? Here's what some of you had to say about this.
Monarchy needs to keep promoting the United Kingdom all around the world, so I'm all for the Kenya trip. However, what I'm not for is the monarchy or anybody in Parliament, whether it be the English, Welsh, Scottish Parliaments, apologising for what happened in the past. So please, keep the trips going, but please do not apologise, because you're not apologising on my behalf.
So King Charles is off to Kenya on our behalf, and I'm delighted and hope he has a successful trip. But we, the British people, and the King does have nothing whatsoever to apologise for. Yes, we operated slavery when it was legal. We gave these people a better way of life from everything I've read. And also, didn't we abolish slavery? Weren't we responsible for that? And so I'm sorry, but absolutely not. Nothing to apologise for. End of.
Should he take personal responsibility and accountability for the actions of his ancestors? I'm really not sure that he should. The most important thing for King Charles and the world in which we currently live is to learn from the mistakes of the past, and we must all do our utmost to make sure that we don't repeat them in the future.
Well, royal broadcaster and historian Rafe Hadel-Manku believes it is enough where, as anti-racism activist Eamonn thinks the King should go further and apologise. Why do you think that? Why do you think, why does it need to be said?
Oh, many reasons. We have to make amends, right? Rafe, I'm hoping you're in agreement with that. We've got to make amends. And
He's
let me
not
just
the
finish.
worst. He's not the worst.
I know, right? But I'll just give you a quote because I think it's really important. So we will not blame them for the crimes, or blame him for the crimes of his ancestors. But or if he relinquishes the royal rights of his ancestors, okay? So that's the first part. But as long as he claims their rights, then, by virtue of descent, he must shoulder the responsibility of their crimes. It's one of my favourite quotes. Hold on a second.
But what are those rights? Let us know what those rights are.
Let me just explain. His name is James Connolly. He's an Irish Republican and a socialist. So
right, I know who he is.
So, moral of the tale. Ah, okay.
Right.
Oh, that's good.
I know
that's
who Connolly is.
Oh, okay, that's good. So, moral of the tale is just in case if it hasn't resonated. If you inherit something, you should take the good, the bad, and the ugly. Anything less than that is hypocritical.
But if he's acknowledging the hurt,
technically,
he's acknowledged the hurt, but to actually say the word sorry, it means payments have to be made, and that opens the door.
I'm so glad you said that. So that is very true, and I will concede on that point. So. An apology basically means an admission of guilt, which means an admission of liability, which opens the floodgates for reparations, which in turn leads to basically UK becoming bankrupt, of course, and all of us here in the studio becoming refugees heading to France on small boats. So I appreciate the fact that if we open the floodgates to reparations, it could cause havoc. So I appreciate that point, and that's why I believe that King Charles will probably just stick with expressing remorse as opposed to apologising and continuously apologising, right?
So what do you think of all of that, Rafe?
Well, I'm a lot more sympathetic, actually, to this issue than, for example, to the ludicrous debates we have about slavery, which was 200 years ago, and Britain has a proud legacy in abolishing the slave trade. This actually is one of the most shameful periods in British imperial history, what happened in Kenya in the 1950s, and the British did overreact in its suppression of the Mau Mau uprising. So I think it's right that the King should...
And Churchill.
I think it's right that the King should actually express regret and sorrow as he is without apologising, and actually he's going to go a long way to actually learning more about what happened during that period. But let's also acknowledge the British were responding to absolute savagery by the Mau Mau themselves, the brutal murdering of whites and African Kenyans as well, hacking them to death with pangas, with machetes, burning them alive. The house of my grandmother's cousin, a Polish Prince Sapieha, was set on fire in an attempt to burn my relations down. No one's been held to account from the Mau Mau side. No one's been apologising on the Mau Mau side. You know, there were faults on both sides, and in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we should go forward. But it seems always as if it's only Britain that's singled out. Britain's always the evildoer, and everything else is brushed under the carpet.
Can I just address that point? I think that's a really valid point, and I just want to add some context. So I agree with you. We do tend to focus on the British, and that's partly due to the British education system, because the British education system, this government decided to start Black history, African history from the 15th and 16th century, where Black people were enslaved by white people. So we are just literally telling loads of white people that they're superior, and we're literally telling loads of Black people that they're inferior, and we're also telling Black people that they should continuously be unhappy with white people because their education tells them so. We don't start it from Arabs, we don't start it from Africans. And just to actually answer your point directly, if we could find the Arabs and the Africans that were a part of kind of oppressing African people, I think that would be a part of the equation in terms of reparations and apologies. The reason why we focus on the UK specifically is because the UK, they're very meticulous and organised. I would give credit where it's due. They actually left 200 years of evidence, 200 years of evidence of crimes against African people. So this is why we focus on the British Empire and British people, notwithstanding the fact that, of course, hold on a second, notwithstanding the fact that the British Empire, hold on a second, the British Empire actually, just so you know, slavers, they gave people that look like me their surnames, right? So we've also got the British education system that starts everything from slavery. We've got the fact that the British Empire made sure that they named Black people with their surnames. So all of these things can be traced back, and of course we have the evidence, 200 years of clear-cut evidence.
Hold on a second, hold on.
I'm answering your question. I'm answering your question, Rafe. You just spoke about the fact that why we keep focusing on the British. I'm telling you why. I've just told you British education system, and I've also told you that
why aren't we holding to account the people who were taking part in the 1950s Mau Mau uprising?
And we
know
should
who
include
these people
those people.
are. We're not talking about things from
and I'm
200
agreeing
years
with you,
ago.
Rafe.
And let's just also acknowledge, you know,
we should include those people.
in the decades after independence in 1963, Kenya became the success story of Africa. Without any mineral resources, it became the economic and political showpiece for Africa. Why? Because of its British colonial inheritance. Its parliamentary democracy, the constitutional separation of powers, its British-based military, civil service and police, all of the institutions. inhabitants. And for 45 years, thanks to that British heritage and the leadership of President Kenyatta, Kenya became a showpiece. The last 15 years haven't been that bad, but Kenya haven't been that good. But Kenya is still one of the top 3 countries. Well, my family were born in Kenya and they still live in Kenya and they call it Kenya. I don't need to lecture from being an activist on how to pronounce Kenya.
No, it's Kenya. That's a British way of explaining it.
Well,
so that's the difference, right? So you were born in Kenya. I wasn't born in Kenya. I was born here. So the British pronunciation is actually Kenya.
My family were actually. Thanks so much.
Well, the British education system tells you that you should pronounce it as Kenya. Just so you know, I went through it.
Thanks so much.
And I'm glad that you told me that, because
it's just
the British
like people in the West calling it Mumbai when all Indians say Bombay. All right, we don't need to have this.
This is why it's so important to experience lived experiences. Thank you, Eamonn. Sorry.
When you come in here, you were basically saying, look, it's a simple thing to do. It's the right thing.
Yeah.
Charles should say, sorry, that's easy. What I'm learning, listening to both of you,
thank you.
It's not easy.
No, it's not. It's quite convoluted, especially when you address and take in consideration my points as well as race points. It's very convoluted. And when we talk about benefits, right? So you obviously spoke about the benefits in terms of colonialism, and I find that really uncomfortable because we're kind of missing the main point here. Let me just say something. Can I just finish my point, please? Let's just talk about benefits because that's your main point here, right? So in terms of benefits, well, first and foremost, you cannot say that black people benefit from colonialism and slavery. That would actually... Okay, hold on a second. Well, let's just be clear. It's basically, by the same token, you were also saying that, I don't know, Israel benefited Jews and Hitler benefited due to the Holocaust. You're basically saying that in terms of your basic logic. You're also saying that it applies to Israel and Jews and those that were oppressed.
Marxist.
I'm not a Marxist.
That's being put forward.
I'm not. That's your
prejudice.
But that's your prejudice.
Kenya benefits hugely from its colonial inheritance. Britain just gave in 2022 £100 million of investment. Canada that same year gave £40 million investment. Why? Because of their British Commonwealth associations and British Commonwealth links. The top 3 countries in Africa for $1 million investments are Nigeria, South Africa and Kenya. What's the common link there? All former British colonies.
Okay. All right, so you're basically saying that we should be okay with being oppressed, enslaved and colonised. That's what you're basically saying.
I'm saying you need to actually...
Guys, we're out of time. I don't know what way to put this. Just blow the whistle. That's it. There's so much more we could be talking about and so much more we've got answered.
We didn't get to the bottom. A very simple question is what's the Mau Mau uprising got to do with the king? He didn't make a decision. It's not a political...
But I already told you. If you inherit the royal rights of your family, then you take the good, the bad and the ugly with it. That is why.
Okay.
The bad and the ugly.
Thank you.
You got your answer.
Thank you.
You got your answer.
And I was fascinated about the James Connolly link as well. All very interesting. Thank you very much.
It's a good point.
Good point.
Right. Wow. Where do we go after that? I know. Let's go to the jungle. No, not us. Nigel Farage. Could he become the next king of the jungle? We're talking about that and all of the rest of the stories in the papers with our headline makers next.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GBNews.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Right, I hope you've all recovered from that interesting debate. Time now to go through the papers, and we're joined one last time this morning by the Deputy Political Editor for The Mail on Sunday, Anna Mikhailova, and the political commentator, Alex Armstrong. Welcome back, both of you. Where should we start, Eamonn? Do you have any particular favourite you want to start on?
I'm fascinated to know what's awaiting Robert De Niro. Well, Robert De Niro, so many films, Taxi Driver, Godfather, Goodfellas. He's in a gender discrimination case. And this is he's been sued for 12 million quid, Anna.
So his assistant was going to sue him, and has done, over how she was treated at work. She says she was underpaid and not treated properly. He has countersued, as is usually the way, saying that she was a bad worker, and some of the detail on this is great. He accuses her of binge-watching Friends, 55 episodes in 4 days on work time.
Dear goodness.
And other things. And this is all going to play out. We're going to get text messages, emails, box office stuff. I mean, move over Johnny Depp. It's Bob. I interviewed Bob a few years ago, and you're told beforehand, you don't call him Robert, you call him Bob.
What?
His friends call him Bobby, and then you have to call him Bob. No one calls him Robert. And I have to say, he hates interviews. He was very sort of, standoffish at the beginning, very closed. Then he warmed up, and he was an absolute sweetheart.
He warmed to you.
He
That's
did.
a tribute to your excellent interviewing skills, Anna.
Well, and Anna, correct me if I'm wrong, but was the assistant not paid something like $200,000 a year?
Yes.
That doesn't sound very underpaid to me.
Up to $300,000 a year. So we're clearly in the wrong business, Alex.
Oh, clearly.
Gosh, well, so when do we have that to look forward to in the next little while?
Yeah, he's already... the court process started. He went into court yesterday, so it's kicking off.
We've got a few Halloween stories doing the rounds, given the date. Alex, this one is about a 40-year-old man who dressed up as the Manchester bomber for Halloween. This is a viral video.
Which we're not going to show.
No.
OK, too insensitive to show, right. But police could probe this 40-year-old for it.
And so they should. I'll just describe for the audience what he was wearing. I mean, he's wearing an I Love Ariana Grande T-shirt, a backpack that says Boom and TNT on it, and wearing a traditional male
He
style
should just
headdress.
be locked up, thrown in jail, key thrown away.
Well, quite right. It's sickening, isn't it? It's children who died in that attack, I'm sure, and many other people who have horrific memories of it. It's disgraceful.
Well, meanwhile, Kim Kardashian has gone a bit OTT on her Halloween decorations, say some. Are we allowed to show this viral video? This is of her normally very sparsely decorated house, now absolutely filled to the brim with skeletons and dismembered bodies, which are decreed bad taste given what's going on in the Middle East at the moment. Ooh. It does look a bit like the scene of a genocide.
It's like the
Rwanda
genocide. That's what I thought. But and I think she's also done it while, as you say, her sparsely decorated home. She's still done it in white colours. I mean, it's frankly so crass.
Bit too much money, isn't it?
Too much attention-seeking.
Oh, look at that. Oh, no.
I mean, I was originally going to defend her, but now I've seen some of those images. I actually don't think it's defensible. I don't think I can.
The secret about everything is for it to be almost cartoonish, so we're nearly going there. Oh, it's nearly scary, but we all know it's just fun at the end of the day. Now, that is just too graphic for me. That's not my idea.
Well, just use all the money she spent on that and donate it to a charity looking after kids in Gaza, you know, innocent people and families rebuilding their lives after the attacks of Hamas.
Tell us, Alex, about Nigel Farage. Well, actually, we'll show you what Nigel Farage has said about "I'm a celebrity, get me out of here." Let's
sounds promising.
I'm used to going through tough times and living with snakes of all different sizes. Of course, Mark, you know, in previous years, I've just ruled it out completely. This year, I'm in a conversation with them. They've sent me a contract. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to have a real serious read of it this evening. And look, I might do it, I might not, but I'm giving it very serious consideration.
It's all about the money. I heard £1 million, and all being brokered by his great mate, ITV's great mate, Georgia Toffolo, of course, was previously Queen of the Jungle, and his great friends.
Wow. I mean, look, I think you should do it personally. I think it's highly entertaining to see Nigel do the show. And, you know, look, I am by far not a fan of Matt Hancock, but whilst he was on the show, he actually did very well at the time. I think people remember him being I think he came third, Matt Hancock, in the end. And not that I would have ever voted for him personally. But, you know, Nigel going on would be great. I think he's, you know, seeing him here on GB News, his audience really love him. I think he'll bring that to ITV and maybe bring a bit of common sense to ITV as well. You never know.
Interesting.
Anna, animals at London Zoo, how are they celebrating Halloween?
They have been given pumpkins and pumpkin-shaped treats to eat. So there are some videos of turtles eating some pumpkins, a tiger eating pumpkins. It's all...
Are any of you eating pumpkins? Do you know how many pumpkins get weight? I mean, there were 300,000 pumpkins in the field next to me.
I like a pumpkin soup.
Patch where kids go along.
300,000?
300,000 in one field just behind my house. And hardly anyone eats them. Most people carve them and chuck them out once they rot.
What a waste.
It's really bad. We should be eating pumpkins. At least the Americans do that for Thanksgiving.
But pumpkins aren't nice.
Pumpkin pie, pumpkin in ravioli, yummy.
I've had pumpkin soup because it just tastes like pea soup.
That's what you need to have today.
I think you nailed it as well. Pumpkin spice latte is the new pumpkin, isn't it? There you go.
Yeah.
OK, guys, higgledy-piggledy, hocus-pocus, whatever, we say goodbye to you. Have yourselves a good Halloween. We're going to the break, and we'll be back right after this. Be there.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Coming up to 9 o'clock, very good to see you on this Tuesday morning. It is the 31st of October, which means
Halloween. And you're tuned into Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Leading the news this morning, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, saying it would amount to a surrender to Hamas and reiterating this is a time for war.
In the UK, divisions are flaring over Israel's war on Hamas. The Prime Minister has sacked MP Paul Bristow from a government position for defying the PM by calling for a ceasefire.
I know Paul very well, and I think it was the right thing to happen. I think you have to have a collective government responsibility, you have to have a collective position, and Paul didn't feel that he could maintain that, so, rightly has been moved because of that.
A big day in the COVID inquiry. Boris Johnson's former advisor Dominic Cummings will re-emerge to give his potentially damning evidence about how the government handled the controversial pandemic.
The battle over Dam Busters HQ, protests and a High Court case today over whether 2,000 migrants will be housed at RAF Scampton, home to the famous Dam Buster pilots.
The King and Queen have started their 4-day state visit to Kenya. It's their first visit to a Commonwealth country since the coronation, and it's where the late Queen's reign began in February 1952. GB News covering this visit throughout the day.
And Alex Burkill will have your latest forecast.
Storm Kieran's arriving later tomorrow, but before then we have some wet and windy weather around today as well. I'll have more later.
Thanks very much indeed for your comments today. Amongst the conversations we've been having, our debates is about children misbehaving, and Marion makes an interesting point. She says it's old men who irritate me, not children, because they think waiting staff are only there for their benefit. It's important to be nice to waiting staff. I do agree.
Andy, who I think is pretty much the only man out of the tweets we've got here, or the messages we've got here, says, if I was in a restaurant and children were misbehaving, I'd ask for money off my bill. It's a restaurant, not a playground for the undisciplined.
Yeah, which makes you understand why the restaurant fined the couple whose children were misbehaving.
Because it's disturbing other customers. Yeah. But I must say, if you're going to take your kids out for dinner, you usually take them a bit earlier than most other folk. You know, sort of 6 o'clock sitting rather than 7:38.
So what are you saying? You're saying that grown-up adults shouldn't eat at 6 o'clock?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
In a restaurant.
So
it's like kids o'clock, isn't it? 5, 6 o'clock.
So have kids o'clock.
Yeah, early setting for the kids, later sitting, whatever it is, for the adults.
Okay. GBviews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GBnews.
So we're asking this morning if the UK is becoming more divided over Israel's war on Hamas. The Prime Minister's message is that the country stands united with Israel.
But there are increasing numbers turning out for pro-Palestinian protests, stretching police resources, while Rebel, Conservative and Labour MPs are demanding a ceasefire.
Well, that has cost this MP his job. If you're listening on the radio, we're looking at a picture of Paul Bristow. Downing Street say his comments demanding a full ceasefire were not consistent with the principles of collective responsibility.
Israel's Prime Minister has rejected calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, saying it would amount to a surrender to Hamas, and cited the Bible, saying this is a time for war.
Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th. Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism, to surrender to barbarism. That will not happen.
Well, the United Nations charity UNICEF says 420 children are being injured or killed in Gaza every day by bombings. It's the latest setback for government plans to move asylum seekers out of hotels and into cheaper accommodation.
This is our next story.
This is our next story.
And the High Court is about to hear a case from West Lindsey District Council that want to stop 2,000 migrants being housed at the former home of the dam busters RAF Scampton.
That follows another legal challenge from Braintree District Council to block Home Office plans to house these asylum seekers at the former site of RAF Wethersfield.
Well, let's go to Ray Addison. He is at the High Court for us today and give us an update on the legal challenges that will be heard in court today.
Well, the doors have just opened at the Royal Courts of Justice behind me. Those two hearings get underway at 10:30 a.m. this morning in the Planning Court. Mrs. Justice Thornton will be presiding over both of those cases. Of course, we're hearing an injunction application from West Lindsey District Council. That's over the Home Office plans to house up to 2,000 migrants at RAF Scampton in Lincolnshire, and also Braintree District Council fighting plans to house 1,700 asylum seekers at Wethersfield Airfield in Essex. Now, both councils are claiming that the Home Office doesn't have the necessary planning permission. The Home Office is using this wartime Class Q rule to bypass planning laws. What is Class Q? Well, it's supposed to be used either in an emergency or to prevent an emergency. But the councils will argue today that this situation does not amount to an emergency. Earlier on, Braintree District Council actually issued an enforcement notice barring the Home Office from continuing any further work at Scampton. They said they did an inspection. It became clear from that the Home Office intended to use the site for far longer than the 12 months that had initially been stated, and therefore they haven't carried out the necessary environmental impact checks for that use. At Wethersfield, the council, even Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, arguing the site is simply too remote. Refugee charity Care for Calais as well says the buildings there are in a state of disrepair. I'm sure the Home Office will argue, well, that's why we're doing the work there to get everything up to order. Care for Calais also saying that the use of these former military bases could actually re-traumatise refugees. We know that 94 are currently on the Wethersfield airfield, at least 94, and we have seen previous reports that at least one asylum seeker has gone on hunger strike there in protest at the prison-like conditions. The Home Office, of course, will argue that this is an emergency situation, and they've also previously stated that the use of these so-called surplus military, former military sites provide cheaper and more orderly, suitable accommodation for those arriving in small boats, whilst helping to reduce the use of hotels. Both cases start at 10:30 a.m. this morning.
Ray, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to RAF Scampton now. Will Hollis has been outside there all morning. Now, Will, Don't need to see Ray. Thank you. I'm done with Ray. Will, tell us about who is protesting there. And if anybody's listening.
Good morning. Yes, well, this is a small part of Lincolnshire that's become a big piece in the migrant puzzle. 2,000 asylum seekers are due here at RAF Scampton, but they aren't here yet. But what you do have, as you can see in the background, is lots of tents, lots of marquees and lots of flags displaying that people do not want asylum seekers to move in here. There are two concerns that are raised by protesters. Some of the protesters are from RAF Scampton's camp, the former married living quarters, living on the doorstep of the RAF base. But also a lot of the protesters, in increasing numbers, are coming from around the country, from places like Birmingham, Devon, I'm told, from parts of Yorkshire. But the two things that they are complaining about, the two problems that they have with this plan, are the first, safety. There's concerns about what might happen if 2,000 male asylum seekers move into a place where there is a very busy A15, not much in terms of facilities, and nowhere really for them to go except into small local villages. One person described it to me as a fear of the unknown. Now, the second thing that they have a problem with is the history of RAF Scampton. That's, of course, the legendary Dambusters Squadron 617, which fought during the Second World War and still flies in the RAF today. Famous, of course, for the Dambuster raids on Germany in 1943. Those raids shot those people into celebrity-like status. People from particularly older generations know the name Guy Gibson, maybe in a way that people from my generation know the name Kim Kardashian, Eamonn. So there are two main things: safety, but also preserving the history, which also has £300 million worth of regeneration in line if West Lindsey District Council were to get their way if asylum seekers don't move in here.
OK, Will, thank you very much in Scampton, and to Ray Addison at the High Court as well.
A day of revelations yesterday. This is the COVID inquiry, which is taking place in London today. It's set to be even more sensational. Dominic Cummings, the former advisor to Boris Johnson, he's set to appear in front of the committee today in what is due to be...
Well, a bit of firework testimony. For more now, we're joined by our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. Have you got your popcorn ready, Tom? If yesterday wasn't compelling enough, even the likes of Stormzy allegedly tuning in or reportedly to watch that, you know, this is... He's got a vendetta against Boris Johnson, that's for sure. And you can be sure he'll have been planning everything he's going to be saying today in front of the inquiry.
Certainly. Martin Reynolds, who sat yesterday, is not exactly a household name. Known within some circles as Party Marty for his COVID party invites to that Downing Street drinks there were in the summer of 2020. He produced some pretty stark testimony and, crucially, some of those WhatsApp messages that now litter the front pages of many newspapers about what exactly senior advisers thought of decision-making from the Prime Minister and other political figures, especially in the first 6 months of the pandemic. But today, rather more box office. The household name who was blasted across every front page and across all of our television screens in the summer of 2020, of course, for his long drive up to Durham and Barnard Castle.
Testing his eyesight.
Testing his eyesight, of course. But it is interesting. Dominic Cummings has not been a shrinking violet when it comes to criticism of Boris Johnson over the last 2 years. And today we're set to see perhaps even more stark testimony. He'll be sitting both before and after lunchtime, and no doubt will be revealing some things that we have not yet heard, and particularly under the forensic questioning of the COVID inquiry lawyers. This sets what we're going to hear today apart from what we've heard from Dominic Cummings before on his own blog and in Parliament as well. Particularly, there will be more of this pointed questioning, which might well reveal more than we have previously thought.
Well, I mean, a lot of the questioning so far has kind of implicated those being questioned. You know, as you say, Party Marty making his apology, and we've seen, you know, the private secretary of the Prime Minister yesterday sort of implying his own role in a lot of the things that went wrong. Will we get the same contrition, admissions, etc. from Dominic Cummings, or will this all be about not my fault, Gov? It was all the blonde bombshell.
I highly doubt we'll get any sort of contrition from Dominic Cummings because ultimately what he has said throughout this is that he was trying to push for quicker, harder and faster lockdowns. And we're going to be hearing a little bit later in the week from someone called Helen McNamara. Now, she was a senior civil servant who came up with this famous whiteboard in March 2020 that kicked us into that lockdown in the first place and that sort of panic in number 10. And I think what Dominic Cummings will be doing is speaking up for certain parts of the civil service that tried to push ministers in a certain direction, but also a crucial criticism of Boris Johnson, which you heard a little bit yesterday and will definitely be expanded on today, is not just that he wanted to sort of open things up, but crucially that he veered from one position to the other. The analogy is of a shopping trolley crashing from side to side of the aisle. One moment saying we've got to close everything down, and the next saying, oh, it's fine, it's only killing people who will die anyway, let's open back up again. It's that indecision that I think we'll see a particular criticism of.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, the whole purpose of this inquiry is to try and learn lessons so that it could be done better in the future. And in many ways, history will look at what we did and argue, surely, lockdown wasn't necessarily the best option, given you look at Sweden, which didn't go down that road, similar outcomes to us, but we still are struggling as an economy in this country because of the hit that we took through lockdown. So, yes, you can argue that we'll learn lessons from the flip-flopping and weak decision-making, but actually, did we take the right course altogether?
Well, that will, of course, be a question, although, of course, Sweden did take a bigger economic hit than its Nordic neighbours did, which did lock down. So these things can't always be compared like for like, because, of course, what happened in Sweden is many people just voluntarily decided to stay at home, and the economic activity dropped as a result. So even though there wasn't an official lockdown, many people just sort of locked themselves down anyway. And there are, of course, all of these questions about what would have affected the United Kingdom, despite what the government said, given how what an international transport hub we are and all the rest of it. But this today will be looking at those early government decisions, and as I say, I think particularly indecision will be under the microscope.
So it's not just about COVID here. This will determine how we view in years to come when we look back at the Johnson Prime Ministership.
I think generally there is a view that is already sort of setting and being formed that the way the United Kingdom responded to COVID was not particularly edifying in the first half of the pandemic, but that by the second half of the pandemic, particularly with the vaccine rollout, then that was actually very, very good and world-leading. So perhaps what we will think about the Johnson ministry is when there's a cause, when there's a clear line of direction, like getting these vaccines, getting these jabs into arms, or supporting Ukraine, Boris Johnson was very decisive and very good. But when there wasn't a clear direction, when everything was sort of muddled, especially in that early part of the pandemic, things were muddled, communication was poor, and decisions were not clear.
Well, we'll get to see that. You'll get to see that, listen to that close up and personal as Boris Johnson becomes a presenter. He gets his own show on GB News. So there we go.
And in the interests of balance, seeing as you always attack Rishi Sunak for what he's wearing, I feel we have to say something about what we can expect to see sartorially from Dominic Cummings today, given that we just saw him strolling down Downing Street in that footage a moment ago in a pair of tracky bums and an orange T-shirt, which personally I thought was quite offensive to see.
Oh,
so what will he be wearing?
Famous
we ought to
beanie
equally
hats,
bash him. Yeah, the woolly hats.
Believe me, there's nothing about him that I would say.
What did you describe him as earlier on one of the front pages of the newspapers? You said he looked like somebody, can't remember who now.
Uncle Webster,
Uncle
Webster. Yes, he is.
This Halloween.
So he doesn't have to dress up for that. Thank you very much indeed, Tom. Appreciate that. Now, after the break, one of our presenters, Patrick Christie's. Patrick is in Brighton today. He's doing an amazing thing because these puppies that we all take for granted and we pick up and whatever. But have you thought about who goes out and sells them? Why would they go out and sell them? Getting people to sell them, getting people to do that job. There is a problem. Not enough people are coming forward to sell the puppies, and Patrick is on a crusade to change that. Next.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy
energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Before we sign off from you today, I want to sing the praises of a man in here, Patrick Christie's, a presenter. Not as presenting or interviewing skills. What can I say? No, they're good too. They're good as well. But this man...
Look at his sweet, innocent face. He's astounded.
But Patrick, you have gone up, in my estimation, my friend, for all sorts of things you do. Your charity work, your...
Stripping.
Losing the weight. Losing the weight. Absolutely. My respect to you as a chubster. As a chubster, I just want to say huge respect to you. But my friend, the Royal British Legion, poppies. We all wear these poppies, and we don't think who's out there selling them, and the Legion are finding it harder, as I understand, to get people to sell them, and that's where you, my friend, come in.
Yes, look, thank you very much for that. I'm here in Brighton today by the War Memorial, as you can see, and the reason why we decided to come here was some news broke a couple of weeks ago that unfortunately here in Brighton they were unable to replace a long-standing poppy seller. So I thought, well, this cannot stand here in Britain, and it's a very concerning aspect. Last year they raised about £10,000 here in Brighton, so I thought, look, we'll tip up and we'll see what we can raise. Well, I started a Just Giving page yesterday, okay, thinking maybe I can get a couple of grand in from my show yesterday and we'll hit that £10,000 target. Well, GB News viewers and listeners have already raised £81,000. £1,000. That Just Giving page has been live for less than 24 hours. It's a remarkable testament to the patriotism and the pride that our viewers have in this country. It is, I think, a stark contrast from some of the scenes that maybe we're seeing certainly around London at the moment, with the cenotaph being barricaded off, and I think a lot of people feel very strongly about that. Now, I'm not sure how long I've got, so if I could just have 30 seconds, because Joe here has just stopped me in the street, and I just want to say quickly, Joe, your great-grandfather's name is on that war memorial. Is that right? Just come a little bit close to me, Joe.
Sorry,
what does it mean to you here, and why is the poppy peel so important?
Well, it's a shame we haven't got anybody to raise money this year. Everybody needs to be raising money for these service people that served all their lives, and this is a memory for them. We're a city. We should be able to be raising money, and for the
for such a good cause,
and for such a good.
And you
cause.
come here most days and have a look at your great-grandfather's name.
Every day, yes. I will look at my great-grandfather's name, and it makes me very proud. Very proud.
Well, it's great to know that there are lovely people like you out there, Joe, and hopefully we can raise a bit of money. So thank you for stopping and saying hello.
Good luck with the fun, and everybody, please just give what you can.
All right. Oh, lovely stuff, Joe. Look, if you do want to donate, it's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. That's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. We're doing a whole show from here today. The Royal British Legion Club is down the road. Got a whole host of guests lined up for you. We'll do the other news as well, obviously, but hey, let's try and raise as much as we can.
Absolutely. Let's pick a number. Come on, let's go for it. What should we say today?
Oh, I don't know. I don't want to limit it because we've been doing so well. If we could get to 100 grand, it would be amazing.
Brilliant. It'd be incredible.
Absolutely. I think we'll smash that.
Well done, Patrick.
Well done, Patrick.
All the best. Thank you very much indeed. Go to that Just Giving page. We'll be back tomorrow from 6 a.m. Have yourselves a good day. Though I'm not sure what the weather forecast has to say about that.
Mixed bag. Up next, it is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Pip. First of all, here's your forecast.
Good morning. Whilst there's some fine weather across parts of Scotland, elsewhere it's going to be a changeable day this Tuesday. I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast. Heavy showery rain overnight continuing for a time across eastern parts of Northern Ireland. Could be some difficulties on the roads this morning, so do take care. Elsewhere, showery rain across many parts of England and Wales through the day, but some drier, brighter weather for a time before some wet and windy weather pushes in from the southwest later. Drier and brighter across parts of Scotland, but chilly here. Temperatures struggling, milder in the south with highs of around 14 or 15 Celsius. If you're going trick-or-treating this evening, there will be a band of rain pushing its way up from the southwest, but more northern areas staying drier for longer. But that wet and windy weather will sweep its way northwards across the bulk of the UK as we go through the early hours of Wednesday. For many, it will be a relatively mild night because of the wind and the rain, but a touch of frost possible in the far north of Scotland. That wind and rain then continues for many as we go through Wednesday. It could be heavy and persistent at times, particularly across northern areas, with then showery spells following in behind across the rest of the country, and some of these showers could be heavy with some rumbles of thunder mixed in too. Notice the beginnings of Storm Ciarán starting to